We heard compelling words from Heba Salah, pointing out the centrality of the pyramids to Egypt's ailing economy. But we also heard from Salima Ikram of the dangers involved in restoring monuments without necessarily knowing what they look like in the first place. The irony at the bottom of all this is that the right course of action may simply be to do nothing for the time being. You've been listening to The Inquiry with me, Gary O'Donoghue. The producer was Louise Clark, the researcher was Matt Tolson, and the editor is Tara McDermott. Technical producer.
Well, good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and we are live out on location this morning at the Salvation Army on Main Street in their offices here for a special morning show where we're going to learn all about the people that live here at the Center of Hope at 180 Henry and Main Street. Thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for joining us. Wednesday morning, March the 6th. We've got a little bit of snow coming. Well, maybe more than a little. 10 centimeters of snow on the way. 10 to 15 centimeters expected in this quick-moving system. In Winnipeg, it's minus 16 right now. It's cloudy in Brandon. It's minus 15. Thompson's clear and minus 33. Big windows behind us facing Thunderbird House North. And to the other areas, we have Salome Mission a couple blocks away. Main Street Project just up the way here. And so we're going to watch as first light comes up behind us in these windows, the city wake up. As this morning we learn about, as I mentioned, people that live here, as well as people that use the services in this part of Winnipeg. How can we do right for their lives? So we have a special show planned for you. We're on air till 8:37 a.m. if you need us in traffic, 788-3093. Good morning to Corey Funk, who's on location, as well as Abby Adeyemi and Brad Lilly's back in our studios at CBC. Heather Wells is there as well and has our headlines.
Good morning. Well, the decision to eliminate standardized tests for some Manitoba students is getting a failing grade from some critics. Provincial tests in math and English for grades 10 and 12 students are being put on hold to allow the province time to review how students are assessed. Anna Stockey at the University of Winnipeg says those standardized tests could have been reviewed without canceling them outright. So we'll hear more from her. And just as we brace for more snow, there's a new law on the books in the city of Brandon about shoveling snow and keeping sidewalks clear. We'll hear all about it in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
On our show, in the first hour of the program, the Salvation Army has been helping to find shelter for the growing number of refugees and asylum seekers that are coming to Manitoba. We are going to meet one of those families this hour on the program. Imagine standing outside here on a cold Winnipeg morning, sitting on your luggage with your two toddlers, just hoping to find a bed. So we'll hear that story. In addition, do you know the history of this place, the Salvation Army? We're going to get into that as we broadcast live from this location this morning. We're at the Center of Hope. Stay tuned. Right now, it's time to plug into national and international news on World Report.
Massey Hall, the most iconic music venue in Canada. An absolute milestone in the careers of musicians who stand on the historic stage. And you have a front row seat. The Beaches, Charlotte Cardin, William Prince, Jeremy Dutcher, July Talk, and more. CBC Music Live at Massey Hall, now available on CBC Jam.
Thank you, Toronto!
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. CBC News has learned the Canadian government plans to restore its funding to UNRWA. The UN aid agency has had to answer for allegations that surfaced earlier this year. In January, Israel accused a number of staff members of being involved in the October 7th Hamas attacks. Since then, a number of countries have paused their support. The CBC's Janice McGregor joins me now from Ottawa. And Janice, walk us through the Canadian government's change of heart.
Canada had followed the American lead when it hit pause on its financial support for UNRWA in late January. That followed allegations from Israel that around a dozen of the agency's employees allegedly participated in the October 7th attacks, part of a pattern, Israel claimed, of infiltration by members of armed groups like Hamas, and what Israel claims has been the use of UNRWA facilities and resources to aid and abet violence. A government source tells CBC News that Canadian officials officials have received an interim report from the United Nations about its investigation into these allegations, and based on that, Canada's comfortable now resuming funding. There are questions, however, about whether this pause was really that much of a pause. Canada's next payment wasn't due until April, and with the minister now expected to announce the restoration of support, it's unclear what payments actually were withheld while the authorities investigated. On top of April's regularly scheduled payment of $25 million, a government source says that the minister is also going to announce additional funding. But the reality on the ground, as the minister saw for himself in a recent visit, is that it's very difficult for other humanitarian organizations to get into Gaza right now. As Martin Griffiths, the UN's Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, told the CBC's The National last night.
We need, trucks to be allowed to pass. We need protection by the police. We need proper agreements which are sustained with all sides to allow for safe delivery. And we need, of course, UNRWA to be there as the prime mover of the humanitarian operation in Gaza.
So, Janice, what can you tell us about the pressure for the Trudeau government to restore this funding?
Palestinian activist groups, Quebec's labor movement, New Democrats, others all demanded that this funding be restored. But this decision today isn't likely to be well received by the opposition. Deputy Conservative leader Melissa Lantsman said on social media last night that UNRWA facilities are used for Hamas terror infrastructure, that it does employ what she said hundreds with direct ties to terrorism. Disgraceful, doesn't even begin to describe this government, she said.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Nikki Haley is expected to exit the Republican presidential race. Multiple American news outlets are reporting she will share that news later this morning. The former UN ambassador will speak at 10 from her home state in Charleston, South Carolina. Haley lost all but one state to Donald Trump after yesterday's Super Tuesday voting. Richard Madden has been following the story from Washington. And Richard, Haley is expected to drop out. What can you tell us?
Yeah, exit stage right. The Wall Street Journal was first to report she'll drop out of the race with a statement later this morning. And that was the big question after last night's result. What would her next move be? Now, she did have a glimmer of hope with her win in Vermont, denying Trump a primary sweep of the 15 states, and the results show roughly 30% of the party voted against Trump. But still, her path to the nomination is now mathematically impossible, so all eyes are on what her next move will be. There are reports that she will not endorse Trump or urge supporters to unite behind him. So what will her message be? Stay tuned for that. Now, from Trump's perspective, meantime, his grip of the party has been cemented after last night's results, where he painted a bleak picture in his victory speech at Mar-a-Lago. Take a listen.
Our cities are choking to death, our states are dying, and frankly, our country is dying, and we're going to make America great again, greater than ever before.
So it's all but certain of a Trump-Biden rematch in November. Biden, of course, dominated the Democratic primaries, except for an upset loss to a relatively unknown candidate in American Samoa.
What happens next?
Yeah, so President Biden will outline his vision in his State of the Union address tomorrow. Then circle your calendar for next Wednesday. That's when both Biden and Trump will likely clinch their party's nominations after primary contests in Georgia, Washington State, and Mississippi. In fact, both leaders will be campaigning in Georgia this weekend. The kickoff to the general election is pretty much underway now.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Investigators in the U.S. are trying to put together what caused a small plane to crash earlier this week in Nashville. The plane took off from the Toronto area with 5 Canadians on board, including 3 children. All were killed when the plane went down near a busy Tennessee highway. The CBC's Thomas Daigle has the details.
Drivers passing by the crash site Monday night captured cell phone video of the fiery wreckage. The single-engine Piper plane had taken off near Toronto, then made 2 stops in Pennsylvania and Kentucky. The pilot reported engine failure to air traffic controllers near a Nashville airport, the nerves evident from his voice.
Yes, I have the runway in sight. November 5 Alpha Tango, runway 2, clear to land. I'm too far away, I won't make it.
Investigators are expected to take about 10 days to produce a preliminary report into what went wrong. They'll try to understand why the pilot overshot the airport runway, making a U-turn and going down just meters from a busy interstate. Aaron McCarter is leading the National Transportation Safety Board investigation.
We're still trying to determine why he decided to overfly the airport at 2,500 feet. I don't know that yet.
The aircraft burst into flames on impact, and the fact it burned so badly is one clue the plane wasn't low on fuel, says former airline captain Keith Mackey.
Whether or not the pilot had just switched tanks because he was landing and accidentally selected an empty tank, this will be something that the NTSB will look at.
Global Affairs says it's aware of reports of the deaths of 5 Canadians in Tennessee. U.S. officials say the victims include 2 adults and 3 children. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
The Bank of Canada will unveil its latest interest rate policy in a few hours. Most experts predict the key rate will remain at 5%. But some economists say leaving it high would be a mistake. They say it could cause more financial strain on Canadian households and businesses and banks that loan the money. Jim Thorne is the chief market strategist at Wellington Altus.
The data says cut. The data says get it down to 3% and let's see how things happen.
The central bank has been driving up borrowing costs since 2022. Its goal was to get inflation under control. The year-over-year rate of inflation has decelerated, but it has not yet reached its specific target of 2%. It has been an unusually warm winter in many parts of Canada. In some areas this week, it felt more like spring. It is not only confusing for people trying to get dressed for the weather, it's also confusing for animals. Some are coming out of hibernation and beginning migration earlier than usual. Natalia Goodwin has more.
Iconic flying Vs of Canada geese have been spotted over the National Capital Region. That's a week or two early, according to Chris Sharp, a population management biologist with the Canadian Wildlife Service. He says if the weather stays warm, we could see goslings earlier too.
They're going to want to get started as soon as the habitat's available for them to get going.
Sharp says he's seen mallard ducks displaying spring-like behavior as well, and you can already hear songbirds singing in the morning. But it's not just those with feathers. The province of Ontario issued a warning last week saying there have been sightings of bears. Michael Runts is a naturalist and lecturer at Carleton University. He says hibernating bears respond to temperatures above zero, so when it gets warmer faster, it can be a problem.
That's not good for the bears because they depend on their reserves left from what they've used during the winter, which is very little. They retain most of their fat. Because this time of year when they come out, there's not much food available.
That means they'll go after whatever is around. So best to secure bird feeders, garbage, and barbecues, and give them lots of space when they are foraging. Natalia Goodwin, CBC News, Ottawa.
Barbie is turning 65 years old this week, and a Canadian star is being honored with her own doll.
Man, I feel like a woman.
Shania Twain and 8 other inspirational women will get a Barbie made in their likeness. The Shania Barbie features Twain's iconic outfit from the video, Man, I Feel Like a Woman. The dolls are being released ahead of the toy's 65th birthday on March 9th and will also mark International Women's Day this Friday.
The best thing about being a woman is the prerogative to have a little fun.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We are live out at what I call our community studios. It really just means we're live out in the city, right where we should be. This morning, we're broadcasting from the Salvation Army Center of Hope. Thanks for joining us. You're on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Well, we're on the second floor in a health office here in the Center of Hope at 180 Henry at Main Street. And where we sit this morning is really part of a 3-block stretch in Winnipeg where many people land when they're looking for help. Help with housing, help with food, help with addictions, help with hope. That's the name of this place. Maybe you found yourself here. Maybe you have driven through this area and you've seen people sitting under blankets as they might be this morning. We passed some folks outside. Sometimes they spill onto the sidewalk. It's a sign of the growing need in our city. And this morning we're going to meet some of the people who live here. And we also this hour are going to learn a little bit about the history of the Salvation Army itself. Stay with us. I also want to mention to a specific story this hour. Coming up at 10 to 7 on our program, the Salvation Army has been helping to find shelter for the growing number of refugees and asylum seekers that are coming to Manitoba specifically. We reported that last week. It's one of the growing needs. So we're going to meet a man who brought his family here. Imagine sitting on your luggage with your 2 toddlers and just hoping someone's going to give you a bed and have a bed to give you to lay your head. So stay tuned. We're going to hear his story. That's just before 7 o'clock. Right now, let's get into what's happening with Heather Wells, who's back at 541 Portage Ave with our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg inner city activist wants Manitoba Public Health to set up pop-up vaccine clinics for measles. The province doesn't have any confirmed cases yet, but the disease has been detected in other parts of Canada and cases are exploding in Europe. Health officials worry about people getting exposed to measles during the upcoming spring break travel period. Heritage Winnipeg hopes a city lawsuit against the owner of an apartment building on South Osborne hasn't come too late. Cindy Tugwell says it's been a frustrating decade dealing with the vacant Rubin block. The city is now suing the owner for almost $40,000 of unpaid inspections dating back about 6 years. Tugwell says it's a beautiful building which would be well suited for affordable housing. We'll hear more about it in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, as I mentioned, we are at 180 Henry at Main. There's big windows behind me on YouTube. You can see them. Now, I would say we're going to see a beautiful sunrise coming up, and, they face north, but we also have the windows from the east. But I don't think we're going to see a ton of sun today. We actually are expecting more snow. Is that right, Abby?
Yeah, right now, Winnipeg, it's crisp. It's minus 15 degrees under cloudy skies. Today's forecast actually brings a shift in the weather. We should be bracing ourselves for about 10 centimeters of snow in Winnipeg, with temperatures reaching a high of 0. Now, the wind chill is going to make it feel like minus 23 this morning. So if you're commuting, you need to prepare for that. Now, as night falls, that's when everything changes, because there's a heads up, there's a warning from Environment Canada that we have snowfall coming from, it's going to be impacting areas from Steinbach all the way down to Killarney. Like the whole part of the south, most part of the south will be affected. We're expecting about 10 to 15 centimeters of snow starting around the afternoon period. And then this will definitely flow through the evening and into Thursday morning. And the warning, there is a warning of reduced visibility and rapid accumulations. Those are possible, especially during the rush hour. The good news is that it's a quick moving system, so conditions should improve by Thursday. But for today, we should brace ourselves for what will be coming from the afternoon period. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at minus 15.
So don't put away the shovels.
Don't put away the shovels yet. Nope.
Let's find out how traffic is moving this morning. Corey Funk's on location, but obviously still has the traffic phone forwarded to your cell.
That's right. And keeping an eye on the highways as well. Looking much better than yesterday. No major issues that I've heard of yet here in the city on the highways. Bike lanes, sidewalks are all looking so far pretty good, but that's not the case where you are this morning. Give me a call on that CBC commuter line, and I will let folks know what you're seeing. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, we're broadcasting live from the Salvation Army's Center of Hope this morning. And if you know someone who needs temporary shelter or a longer stay or a warm meal, located here on Henry Avenue, it's a spot that has been offering those services to the community for many years. But it is more than that. They also have an addictions treatment and mental health services here. There's transitional housing. There's seniors programs. There's a family center. Now, this all began with a vision from one man from London, England, back in the mid-1800s, a pastor named William Booth. And you might recognize one of the buildings is also the Booth Center here in Winnipeg. But to talk more about a bit of the history to start our show, Major Bruce McKenzie with the Salvation Army is with us live here. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
Thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you for welcoming me to your studio.
Your community studio. I love the community studio. So William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, what we know today, what can you tell us about him? Who was he?
Well, he began as an itinerant preacher in the early mid-1800s in London, England, and he just wanted to share the good news that God loves you in a community that really had lost hope. So it was a community rife with human trafficking and addictions and crime, and at the time, bars often had little step stools, so children as young as 4 and 5 could chin up to the bar and get their half-penny shot of gin. And so hopelessness was really the character of that community. And so he just wanted people to know God loves you. And as people resonated with that message, they wanted to share the good news with their family and their friends and their neighbors and their coworkers. And so the work of the Army just kind of exploded.
Really exploded. I mean, the Salvation Army is, as you mentioned, a Christian organization still today, but it supports people as well in 400 communities across Canada, 134 countries. And does it still have a mission that is tied to veterans? We're actually going to hear from a gentleman a little bit later that did some service, and he said, I came here and I knew because I was trained as a veteran that I would be welcome. So what is that about, that history?
So the Salvation Army goes back, our connection with veterans goes back to World War I and then more commonly World War II, when we actually operated forward canteens right up by the front lines. And the history is told of one particular canteen was run by 2 Salvation Army lassies at the time, and they ran out of all the supplies except for flour and sugar and lard, a couple of other things. They said, what can we do with this? And they decided they were going to make donuts as a comfort food for the troops. And so that's what they did, and it caught on and went to all the canteens stationed across Europe, across the front lines. And that began the association of the Salvation Army and donuts. We also operated comfort centers, so rest and relaxation centers for soldiers who had been deployed back from the front lines to get some R&R. And it was just a little taste of home. There was Canadian cooking. There was Salvation Army auxiliary personnel sort of giving them a taste of home. There was company. There was. It's
so interesting because you're talking about sort of the aspect of food, of being mobile. And I know that one of the things that happened when I toured here was downstairs there was a garage with a number of different vehicles. One is an outreach van, which Corey, actually one of our producers, went out with. We'll hear that story later. But one of the other ones was sort of literally like drive up, flip down the front counter and feed people where they need to be met. Is that a core value, meeting people of the Salvation Army, meeting people where they need to be, where they're at?
We summarize much of our mission in terms of soup, soap, and salvation. And so food is everyone needs food, right? And so that's something that we commonly share with people because we want to meet them at their point of need to the best of our ability. That's what our fundamental mission is: love others, right? And if people are hungry, loving them well means giving them a meal. If they don't have shelter, loving them well means doing our best to provide shelter for them.
Where does the term Salvation Army come from?
So in 1865, what we know now as the Salvation Army was simply known as the Christian Mission. And so the big heads were getting together, sort of revisioning who and what we were going to be, and they said the Christian Mission is a volunteer army. But at that time, in the mid 1800s, volunteers was a military term, and regulars were well equipped, well trained. Volunteers, not so much. And so the leaders, as they were talking, the son of the founder, Bramwell Booth, reached across and he said, "I'm no volunteer. I'm a regular or nothing." And he reached out, took the pen from the founder's hand. He stroked out the word volunteer army, and instead he wrote salvation. And the Salvation Army was born in that moment.
The other piece of history, and people will associate Salvation Army with thrift stores, but it actually is behind the thrift store concept itself. Is that right? How did that start?
Absolutely. Again, the idea that you can tell what someone believes by what they do. And if we wanted to love our neighbors and they were suffering from addiction, we needed to provide some sort of treatment for them. And it doesn't do any good to give someone treatment without giving them a way out, a hand up instead of just a handout, as we coined the term. And so the Salvation Army started rehabilitation programs and taught people trades. One of the big trades at the time was cobblering, repairing shoes. And so we, in order to do that, we needed worn out shoes to teach them how to repair them. So we went through the streets and we literally had wheelbarrows, and teams would say, "Bring out your salvage for the Salvation Army." And people would bring out used, worn out household goods. And we take them back to the workshop and taught people a trade. Then we wound up with this problem. We had all these repaired shoes and household goods that were usable, but
What are you going to do with them?
Exactly. And so we wanted to make them available back to the community at very reasonable prices. And then the proceeds went back to fund the operations. And that operation, up until that time, there'd been pawn shops, but there were no thrift stores.
But not a thrift store. Yeah. When did the Salvation Army building in Winnipeg get established?
So we actually trace the presence of the Salvation Army back to 1886 here in Winnipeg.
Really?
Yeah, and then by 1890, the first family shelter. So it was for women and children. The first family shelter of the Salvation Army was established here in Winnipeg, and so that's actually the beginning of our sheltering services in this community, as far back as then, and we see it now in the center we're at right now. Which is shelter for men and women. We actually have the only family shelter in existence in the province.
We're going to hear, as I mentioned, one of the families that found help here and has actually just recently transitioned now into an apartment in Winnipeg. And he's going to share his story. He is a refugee from Uganda, so he's going to join us on the air here. We'll hear his story just before 7. Thank you very much for starting our show with a bit of the history. I know there's so much more. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and appreciate you again having CBC here.
Thanks so much, Marcy.
That is Major Bruce McKenzie, Assistant Executive Director for the Salvation Army, here live with us on location at the Center of Hope. So much more to come. Stay with us. We are broadcasting from Henry at Maine. Well, as I just alluded to, a lot of what we're going to be talking about this morning is going to revolve around what needs people who live here share with us that they need met, and housing is going to come up a lot. Housing right now, or people losing their houses right now, is a conversation happening across the country. Now, let's switch gears here and look at something happening nationally today. Later today, the Bank of Canada is announcing its decision on interest rates. So experts say it will likely hold steady at the current key interest rate of 5%. But there's a new report by the credit bureau Equifax that says more Canadians are missing credit and mortgage payments, and that is especially the case in Ontario and BC. Now, Ian Lee's with us next. He's with the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University at 6:23 a.m. on CBC. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Marcy.
So what are you expecting from this Bank of Canada interest rate announcement today?
I think they're going to hold the rates steady. They're not going to do a decrease. I think they're waiting, to see more data, inflation data trend, job creation, that GDP growth. So I think they're going to punt until April, or more likely even June of 2024.
And walk us through this report by Equifax, people who are missing credit payments. It's a specific almost generation, right?
It is, but I just want to nuance this, because the headlines were very quite dramatic. Sounded like large numbers of Canadians were losing their house, and then you drill down into the body of the numbers, the actual data, and it confirmed what I knew. Excuse me. I was a mortgage manager I was in banking for 9 years before I went back from my grad school, and this was in the 70s and early 80s when interest rates hit 20%. And consumers are very rational. They don't default on their mortgage first. That's the very last thing you default on, and the data is showing that. Right now in our country, the national mortgage delinquency reported by OSFI is 0.18. That means 99.8% of Canadians are current on their mortgage. But what they are doing, those who are hit with huge increases in their mortgage payment, is that they are, I call it, strategically defaulting on other debts they owe, such as credit cards, bank loans that are unsecured, no collateral, or finance companies, because they cannot seize your house or your car. And so mortgage delinquency rates have always been very, very low in this country, around a quarter of a point, half a point. When I was at the bank, and when interest rates hit 20%, the rate went from 0.5% to 1%, which meant 99% of Canadians were still paying their mortgage when rates were at 20. So that's not to trivialize what's happening. It is falling. The interest rate increases are falling disproportionately, not on everybody, because almost half of Canadians don't even have a mortgage, according to CMHC. And another quarter of Canadians bought their house 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, so they have small mortgages. So who's it hitting? It's falling disproportionately on younger people who bought their house in the last 5 years when the house prices were the most expensive, and in the biggest cities. In other words, Toronto, GTA, Vancouver, the biggest cities where the largest house prices are. So that's it's not all Canadians that are getting hit by this. It's those Canadians in the big cities who bought really big houses with big mortgages, and they tend to be younger because it was their first purchase.
What does the data say in a deeper way? What does it say to you about the current situation and the trend? Given what you've outlined about the real numbers of how many people are actually, who is debt free, who is
right.
What do you see as the trends?
I mean, okay, let me sort of tell you what I'm not seeing as the trend. For those who predict, doom and gloom, there's going to be massive collapse of house prices. This is just absolute nonsense. I mean, I just can't explain how utterly nonsensical it is. We're over 3 million housing units short in this country. There is probably 100 buyers for every person that's going to sadly lose their house. So house prices are not going to collapse. If anything, the worry is they're going to keep on going up, and that's a big problem. So that's not going to happen in the trend. The actual foreclosures are infinitesimally tiny in this country, and that will continue because that's people just don't default on their house. It's the last thing you do. Having said that, there is going to be dislocation for younger people. And so my advice to those people who have exhausted all their alternatives, one is you can go to the bank and see if they will put part of the payment increase onto the mortgage debt so you can defer it. Another is to bring in a boarder. If you're in a city that has colleges, universities, if you have a spare bedroom or a finished basement, bring in a boarder. Another is go to the bank of mom and dad. Amazing number of parents in this country do help out their kids. So those are different possibilities. But if all else fails and you literally cannot afford and you have run out of options and you can't afford your mortgage payment, do not wait for the bank to foreclose on you. That will ruin your credit rating. What you should do is list your house for sale through the agent, a real estate agent, and do not tell them you're listing it because you can't afford to pay. Just tell them you're upsizing, resizing, downsizing, sideways sizing, whatever. You don't want to give an excuse to the potential buyer to drive down the purchase price because they think you're desperate. And for those who say, well, I can't sell my house, I've been here, I'm just too attached, and yet if you're not making your payment, the bank will. So it's a choice of either you're going to sell your house and cash out on your equity in that house, which is tax-free if it's your principal residence, or the bank's going to do it, and it's much better that you do it and not the bank. Sell your house.
We'll leave it there this morning. Ian, thanks for your perspective on this report that's come out in the headlines. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks very much, Marcy. Thank you.
That's Ian Lee. He's with the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. If you're in Manitoba and you're listening to this story, we'd love to know what you hear about it. Think about it, and how you're doing with the current pressures with your own maybe mortgage, with your own financial situation. If you want to share or choices that you've had to make, 788-3205 is our listener line. Time right now is 6:28 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live on location at the Salvation Army Center of Hope this morning. It's still ahead in this hour of our special program. Imagine standing outside of this building, 180 Henriette, Maine, with your luggage, with two toddlers hoping to find a bed.
We reached Winnipeg by train. We had nowhere to go. We spent a whole night at the train station. When we reached here, we didn't know we could get help. But when one lady saw us with two infants, they straight away took our kids in, and they took my wife. They gave us a room. My kids slept for more than 8 hours.
Still ahead, the story of a Ugandan family who represents a growing number of refugees who are finding their way here to Manitoba and also here to the Salvation Army. So stay tuned for that. In addition, I want to mention to News of the Day, there's a report coming out this morning at 7 o'clock. We're going to learn more about the snapshot of downtown and how things are looking for businesses starting up and businesses leaving Winnipeg's downtown. So stay tuned. We'll have that news for you later. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, sky is clouded over. It is minus 15 in downtown Winnipeg, becoming windy today and snowy. No sooner are the streets and highways cleared, and more snow is on the way. A snowfall warning for southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg, Brandon, southwest Manitoba, the Red River and Pembina Valleys, Interlake, and the White Shell. Snow is expected to begin later this morning. Heavy snow at times with strong winds. And this is a quick system. By the time it passes overnight, there will be 10 to 15 centimeters of fresh snow on the ground. It will be wet snow. We're warming up to 0 in Winnipeg today. A community activist wants pop-up clinics to make it easier for people to get their measles vaccines. 17 cases have been detected in BC, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Quebec as the virus explodes across Europe. So far, Manitoba has no confirmed cases. However, health officials are urging people to check their immunization records with a doctor. The chair of the Point Douglas Residents Committee says that's easier said than done for people in her neighborhood. Catherine Flynn has written Manitoba Public Health, saying mobile clinics like ones used during the pandemic would remove barriers.
With the population that we deal with, we've got a lot of people who move, say, to more often than average. So they may lack continuity of care. They may not have a family doctor yet or have had trouble getting one. Their children may not have had continuity of care.
CBC News has reached out to Manitoba Public Health for comment on the idea. We are still waiting for a response. The decision to eliminate standardized tests for some Manitoba students is getting a failing grade from some critics. Provincial tests in math and English for grade 10 and 12 students are being put on hold for several years to allow the province time to review how students are assessed. Anna Stockey is a professor of mathematics at the University of Winnipeg. She says the standardized tests could have been reviewed without canceling them altogether.
They're a uniform measure to make sure that everyone is learning the material that we need them to learn so that we know that they're prepared for post-secondary or for other things in life. Those projects and assignments and school tests, those are important too. But standardized tests do need to be a part of a successful education system.
Supporters of the move say not all standardized exams are being paused and many other forms of evaluation will continue to exist for students across the province. The head of Heritage Winnipeg believes a city lawsuit against the owners of an apartment block on South Osborne could give that building a new lease on life. Cindy Tugwell says it's been a frustrating decade dealing with the vacant Rubin block. Her group even tried to convince the owner to sell, and it found a buyer. Now the city is suing the owner for almost $40,000 for unpaid inspections dating back almost 6 years. Tugwell hopes it's not too late.
Why did it take the city so long of inaction before this offense could be, before he could be convicted? Because quite frankly, they could have done this years ago.
If the city wins this lawsuit, it could take over the building. Tugwell says the Rubin block doesn't have heritage designation, but she says it's a beautiful building on a conspicuous corner that is worth saving if it can be salvaged. Well, as people in Brandon continue digging out after Sunday's storm, that city's council is cutting them a break. This is the first major snowfall since Brandon passed a bylaw that could see people fined up to $150 if they don't clear their sidewalks. That's for people and for businesses. Brandon City Manager Ron Bowles says because it's the first winter with fines, this year they'll educate rather than punish.
An able-bodied person that is not cleaning the sidewalk in front of their house, after repeated attempts of reminders of what their obligations are, they still don't clean that sidewalk, then that's when a fine in the future could come into play.
Bowles says fines will be treated as a last resort for people who aren't clearing their sidewalks. Well, Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the big winners of Super Tuesday, the biggest night of the U.S. primary season. And it appears Nikki Haley, who was running for the Republican nomination, is now suspending her campaign. Multiple media reports say she will officially drop out of the race later this morning in a speech from Charleston, South Carolina. That leaves Donald Trump the only Republican candidate, setting the stage for a possible repeat of the 2020 presidential campaign, Trump against Biden. And you can hear more on that as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. The Winnipeg Jets fell to the Kraken last night. Jets captain Adam Lowry in the second period on TSN. His first goal in 22 games, tying Seattle at that point, but the Kraken came back in the third, edging the Jets 4-3. Still, there were reasons to celebrate. Mark Scheifele notching his 700th career point. Jets head coach Rick Bowness says it's quite a milestone.
I think about Mark, man, he comes to the rink every day. He's a real pro. He works at his game every day. He takes great pride in it, and he's always working on his skills. But every practice, he's one of the hardest working guys out there, and he's a good pro. He comes to work every day.
The Jets now get back on the road for a rematch facing the Kraken in Seattle on Friday. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Hey, Heather Wells, you want the listener lines to fill up?
Sure.
Let's ask Winnipeggers, because we've done this in the past, and it's always one people like to talk about. If they think out of your news story there, whether or not we should be fined if we don't
shovel our sidewalks.
788-3205. Actually, that'll be timely if people do call and weigh in on that, because we're getting snow. Abby is in with our forecast and a bit of a warning that we have, a snowfall warning. Abby, do you want to start with that?
Yes, we have a snowfall warning for most parts of southern Manitoba. We should brace for snowy conditions because this is just going to blow all through Dougal, Beausejour, Grand Beach, down to Pinawa and the White Shell. Snowfall is expected with total amounts ranging from 10 to 15 centimeters. Now, the anticipated snow to start in the afternoon is going to continue through into tomorrow morning, and we're looking at heavy snow at some times, which will definitely be affecting visibility for some drivers if you are on the highways at that time. We hear that this low pressure is moving in, bringing organized snow that will cover wide areas in the south. But you should just watch out because it's going to be becoming more intense and could lead to rapid accumulations with that near zero visibility also. But the good news is that this quick moving system and the conditions should improve later on Thursday. However, just be cautious about moving around. In Winnipeg, we are currently at minus 15. Brandon is at minus 15. Thompson is at minus 32. Churchill is currently at minus 23 with ice crystals. Dauphin is at minus 19. Gimli at minus 20. Steinbach minus 13. And Morris is at minus 11.
All right. Thanks very much, Abby.
You're welcome.
Well, Corey Funk is here on location with us. I found our drive over here to the Salvation Army, Corey. It was like calm. So it's kind of like some meltings happen. But somewhere where you're driving, you're in the ruts this morning, I find, because it's melted and where the snow's around it. And then even on the side streets, you get out of them, you kind of, have to get back in on the track. It's like driving like a bumper car or something.
It is rut season out there right now. That is for certain. And besides the ruts, it seems at least people staying in their lanes at least, and things are being pretty calm out there so far. There is one issue to keep an eye out for. I don't know if you got it in your area, but the smoke from that fire yesterday.
Oh, I didn't.
I was in my area. You can feel it. Yeah, it was.
So what fire? What area?
That was a fire on Toronto and Notre Dame yesterday, and that Toronto between Notre Dame and Wellington is actually still closed because of that fire yesterday in central Winnipeg. So heads up, if you do need to head down to Toronto, you can't between Notre Dame and Wellington because of that fire. Other than that, things are running pretty smoothly. Seems like on the highways, sidewalks, bike lanes, roads. But if you see something going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Are you the shoveler in your house?
Yes, I am the shoveler, but I have a neighbor, Frank. Shout out to Frank, who every time I go out to shovel has already shoveled our front like sidewalk area for us already.
And this is the other thing we'll hear from people this morning, I bet. Who in your neighborhood's already doing it? Maybe instead of fines, like we should just have like people assigned and then we pay them.
Okay, maybe that's not a bad. Yeah,
right?
Who's your like go-to shoveler?
I would more happily do that.
Yeah, well, Frank does it for free, which is incredible. He's my hero.
Maybe Frank's going to call us this morning and say, you know what, Corey, I don't actually enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly.
Shovel your own walk.
It just bothers me that you're just not on it. And I try to be on it, but Frank's on it faster. I've shoveled his a few times too to get him back. Not this winter yet.
Let's get to business news. Phil DeMont joins us from our national CBC desk. Hi, Phil.
Hi, Marcy.
So let's get to business numbers, actually. There's new numbers out today on how many businesses are going bankrupt in Canada. What do they tell us?
Yeah, yesterday we were talking about individuals and the debt problems that they're having. Today it's businesses, and January might be a bad omen for companies in Canada for the rest of the year. This is from the Federal Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy. Tuesday they released the January numbers, and they're not pretty. There were almost 750 company insolvencies in January. Now, that includes two things. One, 625 companies that shut their doors, actually, and 134 that said they could pay off some but not all of their outstanding debts. So you compare that 625 number with December, 533 companies then declared bankruptcy, but the number's up 140% if you go back to January 2023, and that's kind of where you're getting. The number's increasing. Hotels, restaurants, and retail stores made up 30% of the bankruptcies. So business groups like the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, they're pointing the finger at Ottawa, saying its deadline to repay that money paid to companies during the pandemic was a culprit. Back then, about 900,000 businesses received $60,000 each, that kind of idea, in emergency cash to stay open during the lockdowns. Now, they had to repay a portion, at least a portion of that money. The deadline was January 18th. Business groups said that date sunk a number of businesses who couldn't repay the loans in that manner. Problem here, though, the government had already extended the repayment deadline twice. So I'm thinking Ottawa might have just figured a further delay wouldn't have mattered at all to the companies that were going bankrupt. For firms, higher interest rate remains an obvious problem. In Statistics Canada's latest survey of business confidence, also in January, 40% of companies said they expect rising interest rates and debt costs to be a big issue over the next 3 months. Not a surprise there, but what it means is you'll probably see these January bankruptcy numbers get replicated in the coming months.
Coming up, speaking of businesses, we're actually going to get a downtown snapshot report this morning. Fully comes out at 7 o'clock. The only headline I have to share right now is that in Winnipeg's downtown, there are more downtown businesses closing than opening. And so there are some highlights that are positive in this report, but when it comes to businesses, we're going to hear more about that. So that's coming up later. Let's get to retail news this morning. Also bad news for retailers this week.
Yeah, I'm kind of a bringer of bad rain today. Two big U.S. retailers, Target and Nordstrom's. Now, they had their numbers come out this week, had better than expected Christmas quarters, but it didn't help their stock price because both said 2024 will be rougher in terms of growing their revenue. Target looking for a 2% sales growth, but that's after revenue fell last year. That was the first time in 7 that had happened. Nordstrom says its sales will contract up to 2%. Latest in a string of weak reports coming out of various retailers, Starbucks, JD Sports Fashion, Sega, among others, saying it's going to be a hard road to hoe in the next 12 months. Then there's Bowflex. The home gym equipment maker declared bankruptcy this week. In Canada, the Body Shop closing something like 33 stores across the country. And the reason for all the retail turmoil, kind of simple, really. Consumer spending in the U.S. is expected to grow a little over 1% if you go April to September this year. That's less than half the growth rate January to March. So people are going to spend less in the States as the year progresses. Canada, same story. Consumer spending grew 1.7% last year. It's expected to grow only about 1% this year, and that's going to cause obvious problems for retailers.
And finally, Oscar Mayer's coming out with a hot dog with a twist now. What's the twist?
It's meatless. I don't know if you can call it a hot dog then, I guess. But Oscar Mayer is known for its dogs and sausages. Will start selling a meatless version of both later this year. Kraft, which own Oscar Mayer's, has been offering up more plant-based alternatives in its various meats and cheeses for a while. Its partner, company called NotCo, which is a plant-based food producer. In the past year, Kraft's dropped out of vegan mac and cheese slices, vegan mayo. All this is part of Kraft's strategy to boost sales by $2 billion within 3 years. So it's jumping on board the good for you food trend to hike revenue. More people started to drop red meat and dairy lately for health and environmental reasons. But alternative foods have been in a slump. The research firm NIQ estimates plant-based meat sales fell 9% last year to under $900 million. Big factor behind the slump, taste of many plant-based foods isn't up to snuff for a lot of consumers. So Beyond Meat, once a darling of that sector, has seen its stock price collapse and it's cut its workforce by about 20%. There's still There's still growth in the non-meat meat market, about 18% over the next 3 years, but that's nothing compared to 2019 when demand grew almost 30% in 1 year.
How are markets looking today?
Generally positive in Europe. Germany France and the UK all up a bit. Hong Kong's bouncing around. It was down 2.5% yesterday, up 1.75% today. Commodities, oils up 71 cents, $78.86 a barrel, and the Canadian dollar is up slightly, trading at 73.65 cents U.S.
All right, Phil DeMont, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
Phil DeMont from our CBC with CBC Business News this morning, filling in for Crystalie Ramlakan. And as I mentioned, further to business news, we're going to get that new report coming out about the state of downtown from the Downtown Winnipeg Biz. That is in the next hour of Information Radio. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa on location with Corey Funk this morning. You're on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Good morning. If you are on YouTube, giving you a wave, you can see behind us that the light is just starting to happen in Winnipeg sky. I won't say the sun's coming up because it's going to be cloudy today. But behind us, you probably can't make it out, but we can see Thunderbird House just to the north of us and Main Street Projects, of course, to the south. We're in this 3-block stretch where you find a lot of different services. We're sitting in the Salvation Army Center of Hope. So we're on one of the upper floors and one of the health offices here. Beneath our feet, though, there are people probably just getting up, maybe still snoozing away as it is still 6:46 a.m. But what a lot of people may not realize about the Salvation Army Center of Hope here at Booth and Main Street, at Henry and Main Street, is that there are hundreds of people that live here. So they live in transitional housing. Sometimes they're here for a short stay. Sometimes they stay for years. There are mental health beds. There's a family center here. And yes, there are emergency services as well. So this morning we're going to hear the stories of people who find themselves here for various reasons in their lives. And we're going to hear all about that as we continue throughout the show. And then many of them are in vulnerable situations, of course. So we're going to hear from them what they have to say about what is needed to help people who are in vulnerable situations like they are in their own lives here in Winnipeg. And so really looking forward to a special morning of stories. If you want to weigh in, 788-3205. Maybe you're someone that's found yourself down here at the Salvation Army at some point in your life. Well, we have a tune this morning from Juno-nominated singer-songwriter Katie Tupper. She's got a new single out. It's pretty groovy. It is about giving and receiving unconditional love appropriately. It's called Need Nothing.
Shiny metal, open up. Hold the water from my cup. Don't you wanna feel the sweetest touch again? It's never ending, never ending. All the ways you move around, satellite and solid ground. I never question what it's all about there. I'll be here for what it's worth. Don't waste time on insecure. Might need too much, but I need nothing to love you. To love you. To love you. I need nothing to love. Need nothing to love you. To love you. To love you. I need nothing to love. See, I can only give, I'm not taking. And there's so much fruit on the tree, baby. It's no lie, no crazy making. I just wanna love you. Couldn't you let me try? Ooh. All the ways you move around, satellite and solid ground. I never question what it's all about there. I'll be here for what it's worth. Don't waste time on insecure. Might need too much, but I need nothing to love you.
We are listening to a new single that is out on CBC. If you're enjoying the music, I completely took the name of the artist off the screen. Katie Tupper is who we're listening to this morning. The tune is called Need Nothing. Abby's whispering in my ear. Thank you, Abby. New music on CBC. It's 11 minutes now to 7 o'clock. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live on location. So we're out of the studio this morning at the Salvation Army's Center of hope? Well, next on our special show this morning, you may have been hearing recently, as we've been reporting, there's a growing number of asylum seekers in Manitoba that is driving up demand for services and putting pressure on Winnipeg's already strained shelter system. Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada tells CBC that more than 5 times the number of asylum claimants were processed in our province this January over last year. So there were 185 claimants in Manitoba compared to 35 last year. Last fall, the Salvation Army here added 60 beds to help out. It's also home to one of the only family shelters in Winnipeg. It's called Sunrise Village, which is in another building in the block that we're in this morning. Next on our live broadcast from the Salvation Army, a man who found himself in that shelter. But first, he found himself outside here with his toddlers and his wife. As you'll hear, he has since found an apartment. We are withholding his name because he fears being identified and having that connection reach back to Uganda.
I'm from Uganda. I arrived in Canada on November 8th, 2023. Yeah.
Okay, so just last year. It's just been months.
Yeah. It's been months.
Who did you arrive with? A lot of people or on your own?
I traveled around with my family. We are a family of 4. Me and my 2 infants, two boys. Me and my wife.
How old are the kids?
How the young one just made 2 this January, and the older one is 3.5.
Oh, little ones, 2 and 3.5. So you've been through quite a journey. You're a refugee?
Yeah. I'm a refugee.
Why did you come to Winnipeg?
First, I reached Toronto, then to find somewhere safe in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you know anyone here when you got here, or is it really just you and your family, as you said, 4 of you?
The fact is, we didn't know anyone here. Internet was our best friend. For us to reach here and find the army, internet was our best friend. When we reached Winnipeg by train, we had nowhere to go. We couldn't access hotel. When we checked online, the best shelter to accommodate us was the army. We reached Salvation Army, and actually we didn't know about the family shelter, the Sunrise. We didn't know about it, but we knew. We saw online, Salvation Army can accommodate us. They took us in. We were tired, but they welcomed us.
How much do you remember about that moment when you're with your little kids and you realize they can help us?
That day, we were very depressed. We were tired. We spent a whole night at the train station. When we reached here, we didn't know we could get help. But when one lady saw us with 2 infants, they straight away took our kids in, and they took my wife. Me, I stayed around with the luggage, and I didn't know that they were going to help us for sure. But we are waiting for what was coming. When one staff came to me, I'm like, okay, come and join your wife and kids. And I was like, They gave us a room. My kids slept for more than 8 hours. On waking up, I didn't know what was going on. It was like a dream. Beside me, there's a bathroom. I had to take a hot shower. All was good.
What was that night in the train station like with your 2 little kids in the middle of Winnipeg in November?
That night, two days in the train, it wasn't easy. My kids had nowhere to sleep. My kids got affected and they got sick. We're not used to this. We're not used to this kind of weather. We don't have winter in my home. And that night we spent at the Union Station because we had nowhere to go. We had no money for the hotel. My kids got sick. I couldn't access the medical facility. Everything was new to us.
So now we can understand when you're talking about, getting into your room here with your kids and feeling that safety? I guess you probably hadn't felt safety in a while.
Staff at the shelter, they knew our kids were sick. We couldn't access a medical facility, but they were trying hard for us to get medication. We filled in our refugee claimant ourselves. Yep. That helped us.
How long did you live here?
It was 2.5 months.
And where are you living now?
We are living we are living in an own apartment. We checked in this month, yes.
What's it like for your family to have your own space?
Oh, it's like we are born again. We are born again. My kids feed well. We cooked for them our country dishes. Mm-hmm. They take a lot of soup. They play around. They are waiting for summer. That's what they are waiting for. Yeah, they are happy. Finding an apartment, we had no work history. We are only on HIA budget, but the caseworker at Sunrise, they helped us on finding home. They gave a good recommendation to the owners.
What are your plans moving forward now in Winnipeg? Will you stay here?
Yes, I'm to stay here. I want my family to have a very big future here. My kids, most especially my kids, they are too young. I want them to get good education, the culture. Yeah, they are young. They can catch up faster than us. My elder son can talk in the accent I couldn't believe because he's young. For him, he's learning a lot more faster than we. I just hope they get to have a very good future and comfortable here in Winnipeg. That's what I hope so. Yeah. They are here to stay. That's what I hope so.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today here at the Salvation Army where you lived. Appreciate you sharing.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. The pleasure is mine.
We are broadcasting from the Salvation Army this morning. That was a refugee from Uganda sharing his story with us. He's now, as you heard, in an apartment with his family, but he found his first safe shelter here at the Center of Hope at 180 Henry at Maine. We are withholding his name because he fears being identified and having that connection reach back to where he has fled from. Still ahead in the show, we're going to hear more about how this organization and others are dealing with the influx of people who are coming here who are refugees and asylum seekers. They added beds here, nearly 60 of them recently to keep up with that demand. Quick traffic update here right now, though. 3 minutes to 7 o'clock. And Vic called that there's a collision at westbound Broadway right outside the law courts, blocking the curb and middle lanes. There's a fire truck on scene, so stay left to pass. 788-3093 if you need us. With headlines, here's Heather Wells.
The decision to eliminate standardized tests for some Manitoba students is getting a failing grade from some critics. Provincial tests in math and English for grades 10 and 12 are being put on hold for several years to allow the province time to review how students are being assessed. Anna Stockey at the University of Winnipeg says those tests could have been reviewed without cancelling them altogether. Well, this is a sound you'll be hearing a lot of as more snow heads this way. And they're hearing that in Brandon because starting this year, those people who do not shovel their sidewalks in front of where they live could be fined. We'll hear from some people in Brandon in our next local news at 7:30.
Still ahead on our show from the Salvation Army, outreach on one of the coldest nights of the year.
I can't leave her in this area. It's too bad. I just got to make it to my friends on Sherbrooke, and I'll be okay. Thank you. Drive safe, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
So I guess a situation like that, if they say they don't want to ride, I guess that's all you can really do, eh?
Yes, you can't really force it, It's got to be their choice, So we've offered them what we can, and they turned down the help. So I hope she's okay.
Corey Funk recently spent a night out with the outreach van from the Salvation Army. We'll have that story in the next hour. Also, it's not just about emergency help here. It's about people who live here, most commonly men aged 55. We'll meet one of those men. He spent 11 years living in Beausejour. He lived many years in the Wolseley neighborhood. What brought him here to the Salvation Army?
Today on The Current.
If they will lose the war,
This crazy army will go further.
For more than a decade, Masha Aliokina from the punk band Pussy Riot has been very loud in her criticism of Russian President Vladimir Putin. And despite time in a Russian penal colony, she's not holding back. Coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Nikki Haley is expected to exit the Republican presidential race. Multiple American news outlets are reporting she will share that later this morning. The former UN ambassador will speak at 10 a.m. Eastern from her home state in Charleston, South Carolina. Haley lost all but one state to Donald Trump in yesterday's Super Tuesday voting. Richard Madden has been following the story from Washington. And Richard, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, exit stage right. The Wall Street Journal was first to report she'll drop out of the race with a statement later this morning. And that was the big question after last night's result. What would her next move be? Now, she did have a glimmer of hope with her win in Vermont, denying Trump a primary sweep of the 15 states. And the results show roughly 30% of the party voted against Trump. But still, her path to the nomination is now mathematically impossible, so all eyes are on what her next move will be. There are reports that she will not endorse Trump or urge supporters to unite behind him. So what will her message be? Stay tuned for that. Now, from Trump's perspective, meantime, his grip of the party has been cemented after last night's results, where he painted a bleak picture in his victory speech at Mar-a-Lago. Take a listen.
Our cities are choking to death, our states are dying, and frankly, our country is dying, and we're going to make America great again, greater than ever before.
So it's all but certain of a Trump-Biden rematch in November. Biden, of course, dominated the Democratic primaries, except for an upset loss to a relatively unknown candidate in American Samoa.
What happens next?
Yeah, so President Biden will outline his vision in his State of the Union address tomorrow. Then circle your calendar for next Wednesday. That's when both Biden and Trump will likely clinch their party's nominations after primary contests in Georgia, Washington State, and Mississippi. In fact, both leaders will be campaigning in Georgia this weekend. The kickoff to the general election is pretty much underway now.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Ottawa is planning to restore its funding to UNRWA. CBC News has learned that Canada will move ahead with its scheduled payment of $25 million next month to the UN aid agency. The federal government paused its support in January. Israel alleged some UNRWA employees had been involved in the Hamas attacks on October 7th. A government source says Canadian officials received an interim UN report examining the allegations, and based on the findings, Ottawa is comfortable resuming funding. The Minister of International Development, Ahmed Hussein, is also expected to announce new money to help the aid agency. In Gaza, people are facing starvation and disease now 5 months into the Israel-Hamas war. The CBC's Abby Kodlason reports.
Desperate people crowd around a flour truck in Gaza City. Starvation is no longer a mere concern, but a harsh reality.
They keep telling me, we are searching for food. We are searching for food.
Gara Al-Kurd is in Rafah, but her daughters, aged 9 and 11, are in the north, where the UN says child malnutrition rates are 3 times higher than in the south.
They turn to skeleton or something, so I'm very worried about their health. I don't want to lose them.
According to the World Food Program, the number of aid trucks that entered Gaza in February was half that of what was delivered the month before.
So patience needs to run very thin, and a whole series of warnings need to be given.
That's British Foreign Secretary David Cameron speaking about Israel's responsibility as an occupying power to provide aid to Palestinians. Cameron is set to say this directly to Israeli opposition leader Benny Gantz in London today. Gantz heard similar messages in Washington as he visits allies without Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's blessing. Peter Ricketts is in the British House of Lords.
It's an Israeli decision to press Netanyahu, to change his policy, to get away from this policy, which seems to be to prolong the war. And no doubt Netanyahu has a personal interest there.
Amid concerns Netanyahu continues to be resistant to Western pressure, the U.S. and U.K. making their demand for more aid to Gantz. Abby Kodlason, CBC News, London.
The Bank of Canada will unveil its latest interest rate policy in a few hours. Most experts predict the key rate will remain at 5%, but some economists say leaving it high would be a mistake. They say it could cause more financial strain on Canadian households, businesses, and banks that loan the money. Jim Thorne is the chief market strategist at Wellington Altus.
The data says cut. The data says get it down to 3%. And let's see how things happen.
The central bank has been driving up borrowing costs since 2022. Its goal was to get inflation under control. The year-over-year rate of inflation has decelerated, but it has not yet reached its specific target of 2%. Some economists expect interest rates will stay unchanged until summer. The Kremlin says Russia will not recognize the new arrest warrants issued by the world's top court. The International Criminal Court yesterday issued the warrants for two high-ranking Russian commanders. They are both suspected of war crimes in Ukraine. The first time the ICC announced charges in the conflict was in March of 2023. That was for the arrest of Vladimir Putin. The Russian president is accused of being personally responsible for the abductions of children from Ukraine. For Ukrainians fleeing the war, an immigration deadline is looming. Canada's emergency visa program is nearing its end. Tens of thousands of Ukrainians are expected to arrive before March 31st. Those already living here need to extend their visas before that date. As Georgie Smythe tells us, missing the deadline could make it harder for people to stay.
Andrei Batitsky and his wife Katerina Bondarenko are making a life in Metro Vancouver.
It was like my dream, to come here.
They're from Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, and one that lies just 30 kilometres from the Russian border. Canada created an emergency visitor visa for those fleeing the war. That's how the couple ended up here 2 years ago, but they must extend it before March 31st.
You've only got 25 days to send that in.
Yeah.
Do you feel stressed about?
It's a good, serious question. I'm getting stressed from the beginning.
There's more than 200,000 Ukrainians living in Canada under this program. Extending their visas mean many could stay until March 2027. Daniel Lee is an immigration lawyer with international business law firm Fasken. He says there are other federal and provincial avenues if people miss out, but the application gets trickier.
If you don't submit that work permit extension application or that study permit extension application, then you would have to go through the normal channel.
A small number of Ukrainians in Canada can apply to become permanent residents if a member of their family is already a citizen. It's a longer-term, more stable avenue Batitsky and Bondarenko wish was available to them.
For now, I building future for my wife, for me.
One visa extension at a time. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, Vancouver.
A housing concept that developed during the American Civil Rights Movement is back in some Black communities in Nova Scotia. It's called a community land trust, and it's now growing in Atlantic Canada. Groups are trying to meet the need for housing, and as Shayna Luck explains, the idea makes more sense than ever.
I feel like what we're doing is deeply resonating with people.
Curtis Wiley's pitching his community northwest of Halifax on a new idea, a land trust where the land is held forever for the benefit of a group. Wiley worries high housing prices will drive out residents and split apart the historic Black community of Upper Hammonds Plains. It was established more than 200 years ago as a settlement for Black refugees from the War of 1812.
I believe that our community would be gone. It would just be really fragmented.
In central Nova Scotia, 6 plots in the historic Black neighborhood called The Marsh are also set to become a land trust. Lynn Jones bought them so developers wouldn't.
That's not what I wanted, so the land trust was actually quite perfect.
The community land trust model was developed during the American Civil Rights Movement. It was a 6,000-acre collective farm called New Communities, Inc. in southwest Georgia. But founder Shirley Sherrod only realized in 2015 that others were using the same model.
I was blown away, and that's when I learned that there were so many others in other cities
using the model we created.
In Nova Scotia, 4 Black communities are now establishing fledgling land trusts. Curtis Wiley loves sharing the story.
And I was like, wow, this is such a missing narrative, especially in the Canadian landscape.
Looking for solutions in the past as the housing crisis affects his community's future. Shayna Luck, CBC News, Halifax.
And for more, go to CBC Local, click on the Nova Scotia tab, and you will find the story. Can collective ownership solve housing affordability? These Black communities in Nova Scotia are working on it. That is on the Nova Scotia page at cbcnews.ca. That's World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. We are broadcasting live from the Salvation Army Center of Hope, 180 Henry at Main this morning as the sun is coming up. We are at the largest transitional and emergency shelter in Manitoba. And this hour, we're going to bust some myths about downtown's vulnerable population.
When you are poor, you are always stigmatized. If you have money, people love you. If you don't have money, people will shun you. The people downtown are hidden, stamped. Automatically. If I were to apply for a job and they ask for my residency and say, that's Salvation Army, when you live here, it is assumed that you are a drug addict.
Well, here's Sean's story about how he came to live here. Also, speaking of downtown, there's a brand new report. It just came out at 7 a.m. this morning. It outlines some of the ups and downs of 2023 for our downtown. And there's more downtown businesses closing than opening. There are some bright spots in this report that just came out. We also are hearing that 2023 saw more people visiting and moving into the downtown area. Kate Fensky, the CEO of Downtown Winnipeg Biz, is going to be with us to walk us through this new data about our city's downtown. So she's going to be live with us at 10 to 8 this morning. Right now, it's 7:11 a.m. Let's go to Heather Wells for other headlines.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg inner-city activist wants Manitoba Public Health to set up pop-up vaccine clinics for measles. The province doesn't have any confirmed cases so far, but cases are exploding in Europe, and there have been some detected in other parts of Canada. Health officials are worried about people getting exposed to measles during the upcoming spring break travel period. Heritage Winnipeg hopes a city lawsuit against the owner of an apartment building on South Osborne hasn't come too late. Cindy Tugwell says it's been a frustrating decade dealing with the vacant Rubin block. The city is now suing the owner for almost $40,000 for unpaid inspections dating back almost 6 years. Tugwell says that is a beautiful building which would be well suited for affordable housing. We'll hear more coming up in our next news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's happening in the weather forecast. Abby, it's funny. I thought it was going to be all cloudy. It's going to get cloudy, as you're about to tell us. But I just got some of the most beautiful photos.
Oh, tell me about it.
Oh, you should check out Instagram. I posted them there, and people can have a look. There's also some on my Facebook page as well as some video from Salvation Army this morning. But we're on one of the health offices here, so we're surrounded by windows. We're on the second floor, so you can look straight east over the Disraeli Bridge, behind us Thunderbird House, and then you can see Main Street, of course, and a little bit further north. But the sunrise, and from the east windows, was just like vibrant pink this morning, like the sky was on fire, just gorgeous.
Oh, I'm missing that already.
Well, I'll tell you what do they say? Red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. That means that something's coming, and you do have a storm that is coming. Not a storm, snow.
That's true. We have a snowfall warning for southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg, Brandon, southwest Manitoba, the Red River Valley, and the Pembina Valleys, the Interlake, and the White Shell. You just have to brace yourself for folks in that area for some snow to begin later this morning, and the snow is expected to total about 10 to 15 centimeters. This anticipated snow is going to be starting around the noon period, and then it's going to continue into Thursday morning. We're looking at heavy snow at some times, and this, I call it a quick system. This low pressure system is going to be moving in, bringing organized snow that will cover wide areas. But you should also watch out for bands of a more intense snow that could lead up to rapid accumulations and near zero visibilities if you are on the highway. The good news is that this quick moving system and conditions could improve by Thursday morning. But you just have to apply caution as you travel today because of the rapid accumulation of snow, which might make travel very tricky, especially during the rush hours in urban areas. But by the time it passes overnight, we should be seeing 10 to 15 centimeters of fresh snow on the ground. Currently, Winnipeg, we are at minus 14 degrees under cloudy skies. As we move through the day, we should just expect that shift in the weather. The clouds will gather as we see outside already, and then we're in for that snowfall. We're heading for a high of 0 today.
So a little bit later today, the snow will start for us. So enjoy the morning.
Yeah.
Now, we do have some problems in traffic, nothing major, but Corey, what do we know?
Yeah, a couple things to look out for. Got a call from Vic. Westbound Broadway, just right outside the law courts there is a collision blocking the curb lane and middle lane, so keep left to get around that. There is a fire truck on scene as well. Because of that fire yesterday, that big fire at Toronto and Notre Dame, that Toronto is still closed between Notre Dame and Wellington because of that fire. So avoid that area this morning as well. But if you see anything else going on out there, seems like things are going fairly smoothly on the highways. But if you see something going on, if you're walking, bike, and driving, give me a call. I'll let folks know what you're seeing out there. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, as we broadcast this morning from the Salvation Army Center of Hope, beneath my feet a couple of floors, there are about to be hundreds of people gathering for breakfast, and they live here. And obviously we're giving people privacy. But who most commonly lives here at the Salvation Army Center of Hope? Well, most commonly, actually, it's men aged 55. Next up on the show, we're going to meet one of those men and find out how he came to live here. I recently sat down with Sean. He was dressed head to toe in black. He had a graying beard. He has bags slung across his body and a key around his neck. As you'll hear, he likes to keep to himself, but he says he hopes that sharing his story might bust some myths about the downtown population. We are here at the Salvation Army. How long have you been a resident here?
Well, I've been downtown since 2020. I've been in the Salvation Army. I've been in 190. I've been in Siloam as well.
When you say downtown, where were you before, Sean?
Well, I lived in Beausejour for a very long time with my wife, and she passed away in 2017. And there was a sudden civil litigation involving a will leaving everything to her ex-husband that she was legally divorced from. And long story short, I was robbed of bank accounts, house, evicted from the home. We were together for almost 11 years. Yeah. Everything was taken.
How did you begin to come out from that?
I was evicted in 2020, and I went on welfare briefly in Beausejour. And for reasons of my personal well-being and safety, I made a decision to come into the city.
Okay. So had you lived in the city before? Or?
Oh, yes. I was born in Winnipeg, grew up in the West End, lived in Wolseley forever. I spent time in the Naval Reserve. I took basic training with the Princess Patricia's Light Infantry. I worked as a bodyguard for a while, worked security. I made a decision to switch to healthcare, and I worked as a healthcare aide and a community support worker, home care attendant, all of that sort of thing. I actually used to work down here through community services, being sent to attend with people to their medical appointments, their dental appointments. So I'm quite familiar with the Salvation Army.
And with the area. What brought you to live here? Do you show up at the door?
I showed up at the door, and I provided them with what paperwork that I had and identification, and they were very understanding and have provided me with the basic necessities of life. I'm very lucky. I have a room, so I have my privacy. There's a bed, there's a window. I just listen to the radio.
Thanks for saying that. You knew CBC when I came in.
Yeah. Oh no, I know you. I know your voice. Of course I do. Listen to CBC all my life. Yeah. If you have a room, you get 3 meals a day.
What do you think the biggest misconceptions are about people that live here like yourself?
When you live here, it is assumed that you are a drug addict for the most part, because it is a common problem downtown. But I've never snorted coke. I've never done crack. I've never dropped acid. I don't
Not been one of your struggles.
I don't like taking pills of any kind. And even when I have money, I'm too cheap to be a boozer. I personally would make the claim that I'm not here because of personal irresponsibility as regards being able to handle money, work, having problems with drug addiction.
Is that one of the things, the stigmas?
When you are poor, you are always stigmatized. If you have money, people love you. If you don't have money, people will shun you. The problem with what happens down here is that a lot of the people here have suffered traumatic life experiences as children. They've suffered a variety of kind of abuse, and some of them are abusers themselves.
You actually are representative of the average person that does live here, actually, longer stay. Men, 55 was the average age. People probably would find that surprising.
They probably would. People are busy working, making money, enjoying their life, and the people downtown are hidden to a great degree and stigmatized, stamped automatically. If I were to apply for a job and they ask for my residency and say 180 here at Salvation Army, what would happen?
What do you think would happen?
Oh, it depends on the work agency, but you're definitely stigmatized.
Where would you be, do you think, without having this place to live?
Honestly, dead, probably. Because I'd either have to be staying there or I'd stay there.
And where are you pointing out the window?
I'm talking 190, I'm talking Siloam. I have a room with a lock on the door here. I'm able to hide in my room, not have to walk through the neighborhood, and risk my personal safety, because it can be dangerous around here.
What do you hope your future holds?
What I'm hoping for in terms of my personal future is simply to be able to access and have my own personal privacy somehow, to not have to deal with so many people, and the ability to maybe cook my own food.
What kind of options are there for you to find housing in Winnipeg right now?
You can argue about all of the politics until you're blue in the face. There is not enough housing. The prices have gone up, and you have people on the street.
So what are your plans for the future? Are you hoping to still, given even all those challenges, find a place? Or
of course. I have been taking it a day at a time. My ability to make personal plans has been limited due to having no money. You need money to be able to have a phone, to get on the bus. You have to have some sort of a firm foundation to be able to then build upon that base.
Just last, what would you say to someone listening that maybe has driven through this section of Winnipeg and just driven on by?
Anyone could theoretically end up being homeless at any time. Even if you've got a lot of money, hey, something can happen. It is in the best interests of all Winnipeggers to be able to have their leadership provide stable housing and enough housing for the residents. If there is not enough housing, then you have a bunch of people on the street without housing, without jobs. This increases the potential of drug abuse and crime. Getting lured into prostitution, it will spread out from the center.
I wondered if that stigma you were talking about somehow impacted even, you in your life.
In terms of my family members, of course.
Really?
Oh, sure. You're living in the Salvation Army, and I hear this repeatedly from people. They lose their job, they have a breakdown, they end up here, and they are shamed and they're shunned.
Thank you for being on CBC with us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That's 58-year-old Sean Anthony Trevennin Black. He lives here at the Salvation Army Center of Hope. We're broadcasting live here, 180 Henry at Main. We have lots still to come, including meeting more people who live here. And they find themselves here for all kinds of reasons, still ahead from being ripped off in Calgary to finding a bed in Winnipeg.
My ex and I went to rent a place, and it was a scam. So we were out $2,200 with a U-Haul full of stuff. And figuring out, now what do we do? So we threw everything in storage and figured, well, we'll live in a hotel. $3,000 a month. So we couldn't do it. So we lived at our local 7-Eleven for a year.
What do you mean you lived there?
They gave us literally a parking stall and let us live at their 7-Eleven.
Michelle's story is coming up. She is staying here at the Salvation Army. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thank you so much for joining us for our broadcast this morning. We are on the second floor here at the Salvation Army Center of Hope. Big windows all around us. And yeah, after that beautiful sunrise I was talking about earlier and I posted pictures of, now it's really clouding over. As Abby said, we're expecting snow. It's going to be windy. Our high today in Winnipeg is 0. We are expecting in the city about 10 centimeters of snow, and right now it is minus 14 degrees. Let's turn our attention now at 7:25 a.m. on CBC to Morning Sports. We have Scott Regehr, who's with us live now. Hi, Scott.
Hi there, Marcy.
So the Jets were hoping to extend their winning streak, but this time their comeback fell short.
Yeah, they were down a goal late in the third period on the power play, and with the Connor Hellebuck on the bench for an extra attacker, Marcy, Neil Pionk could not beat the outstretched Seattle netminder, and the Jets ultimately fell 4-3. Head coach Rick Bowness says it was an uncharacteristic loss from his team, but was still pleased with the pushback the team had.
We never quit, and we didn't quit tonight. Things didn't go our way, but we had those chances late in the game with the goalie out, and the puck just didn't go in. But they were still fighting right till the end, and that's what you want to see.
So this loss combined with Dallas's win means Winnipeg is back in second place in the Central. They'll have a shot at pulling even with Dallas again on Friday when they take on the Seattle Kraken.
Let's go to curling now, where the so-called bizarro Brier continues. It is, if you compare it to what people would have predicted, right?
Yeah, it is. Has been turned on its head, this Bonspiel. You look at the upsets that has led to a rink like Northern Ontario or the Northwest Territories or Prince Edward Island. They're all right near the top of their respective pools. You take PEI, Marcy, that province has not made the Brier playoffs since 1996. In fact, and it is a fact that Skip Tyler Smith is very well aware of.
I was just actually born after 96 whenever they made the playoffs, but for us to be able to carry that torch and go above expectations, I think will hopefully motivate some of the younger people in PEI to put more effort in, train more, practice more, and hopefully, we can produce some good talent in the future for years to come.
After a win against Quebec on Tuesday, Smith has PEI at 4-1, although tough matches lay ahead, including his first today, which comes against arguably the best men's player ever to come out of the Atlantic region in Brad Gushue. Mixed results for Manitoba rinks yesterday, Marcy. Both Matt Dunstone and Reid Carruthers beat New Brunswick while losing to Brendan Bottcher of Alberta and Caitlin Schneider of BC, respectively. For Carruthers, his first loss of the tournament, meaning there are no more undefeated rinks.
Let's finish with a big soccer match for Canada's women's team tonight.
Yeah, against their biggest rivals, the U.S., in the final of the Gold Cup. That tournament involves the best teams from North and Central America and the Caribbean, and this time around also includes the top sides from South America, Marcy. So a win would be a very big deal. But beating what is traditionally the top team in women's footy on their own turf in San Diego, well, that's a big ask. Canadian coach Bev Priestman says it starts with being mentally prepared.
Against the very top teams, sometimes it's mindset that separates the two teams, and I just want the team to really go for it. I'd rather die trying, doing what we do, and we'll learn from it. And I think that's the most important thing. But I do think us on our day, believing that we can do what we need to do, can beat the US.
So a fairly late start tonight, Marcy, for the match. It kicks off at 9:15 Central Time on the specialty Channel 1 Soccer. A victory would not only be one of the biggest achievements in Canadian footy history, it would be a shot of confidence for Priestman's side ahead of the Olympic Games, where, of course, Canada is looking to defend that gold medal they won in Tokyo.
All right, Scott, thank you.
You betcha.
Still ahead as our special broadcast from the Salvation Army Center of Hope continues. Corey Funk recently hopped into the Salvation Army's Extreme Environment Response Vehicle and spent a number of hours overnight getting a sense of how workers spend their nights, helping people in need. It was one of the coldest nights last week, so we'll hear more about that emergency response. And then later we'll continue to build on some of the myths here, one of them being that emergency response is what the Salvation Army does. Of course, it is not just that. There are beds here for people. There are mental health services and transitional services, and we'll meet some more people who are involved here at the Salvation Army. If you need us in traffic, 788-3093. I also want to mention that just out this hour, a new report, the Downtown Winnipeg Biz out with a report about what things are looking like in our city. Rising visitation, more residents, and investment. But more businesses moving out than moving in. So Kate Fenske's on the show this half hour, the CEO of the Downtown Winnipeg Biz. Stay with us for that. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is minus 14 in Winnipeg. More March weather heading our way. Winnipeg is under a snowfall warning this morning. Not just Winnipeg. We also have Brandon, the Interlake, southwest Manitoba, the Red River and Pembina Valleys, and the White Shell. Anywhere between 10 and 15 centimeters in a fast-moving system that will begin with some wind as well throughout the day and warming up to 0 in Winnipeg. A Winnipeg inner-city activist wants Manitoba Public Health to set up a pop-up vaccine clinics for measles. The province doesn't have any confirmed cases of measles so far, but the disease has been detected this year in other parts of Canada, and cases are exploding in Europe. Health officials say you should check your immunization records with a doctor or a public health office. Point Douglas Residents Committee Chairperson Catherine Flynn says removing barriers to immunization is important.
Asking them, which is the official response, please go to your family doctor and check this out, that's not a reasonable response. And I think what we should be doing is getting some pop-up clinics in places like Barber House here, which has a daycare, and allowing parents and children to get vaccinated immediately.
Experts are concerned about people being exposed to measles during the upcoming spring break travel period. So far, Manitoba Public Health has not commented on the idea of setting up mobile clinics. Critics say it's a shame some Manitoba students will miss out on standardized testing in math and English. The government announced it is scrapping province-wide tests for students in grades 10 and 12 over the next few years while it works to review and modernize how students are assessed. Anna Stockey is a professor of mathematics at the University of Winnipeg. She says assignments, projects, and other tests are worthwhile, but they don't take the place of standardized testing.
You can't fix what you can't see, so it's important to collect data so that we can see how students are doing and so that we can compare performance over time and that we can make corrections if our students aren't learning.
Supporters of the move say the temporary elimination of the grade 10 and 12 tests isn't the end of the world. They say standardized tests in math, English, and other courses will continue to be conducted in other grades. Heritage Winnipeg hopes a city lawsuit against the owner of an apartment building on South Osborne hasn't come too late. Cindy Tugwell says it's been a frustrating decade dealing with the vacant Rubin block on Osborne and Morley. Her group tried to convince the owner to sell. It even found a buyer. Now the city is suing the owner for almost $40,000 for unpaid inspections dating back almost 6 years.
This will open the pathway for the city to be able to take title without compensation, and I think that we have an opportunity here to still save the building and still have it an integral part of the community as opposed to, demolition.
Tugwell says the Rubin block doesn't have heritage designation, but she says it is a beautiful building which would be well suited for affordable housing. Shovel or be fined? That is the reality now for people in Brandon. Sunday's big dump of snow is the first under the city's new bylaw. People in Brandon could be fined up to $150 if they don't clear their sidewalks of snow. Doug McCallum came home to knee-deep snow on his driveway yesterday after a trip to Florida. He says the bylaw is a good idea.
There'll be people that can't do it, physically can't do it, and for them I feel badly, but we are capable for sure. of doing it. So I think that, you can do your part or whatever. I mean, it's not too much longer till spring.
We hope, at least. The City of Brandon says since this is the first year, officers will focus on educating instead of fining. It is back to work for provincial politicians. The legislative session begins today. Premier Wab Kinew says the spring session will see the province work on healthcare, safer communities, and the economy. The new government's first budget will be delivered in early April. If you hold a mortgage, take note. The Bank of Canada will announce its latest interest rate policy in the next hour, about 1 hour from now. There is a wide consensus. Rates will remain unchanged, but experts are looking for a hint of when the bank may start cutting borrowing costs. The Bank of Canada rate affects variable rate mortgages and fixed rate mortgages that are up for renewal. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. A frustrating loss at home. Nino Niederreiter in the third period on TSN, giving the Jets the lead over Seattle, but the Kraken come back, edging the Jets 4-3. Jets head coach Rick Bowness says it was frustrating all around.
We certainly weren't at our best. Then when you make it 3-2 like that early and then we give up that goal, that was frustrating. And to give up the penalty kill goal is a little frustrating.
It's also frustrating for Mark Scheifele, a loss in a game where he marks a milestone, his 700th career point last night. The Jets now get back on the road for a rematch facing the Kraken in Seattle on Friday. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather Wells, full disclosure, I walked away to grab something for a moment, and I'm not sure if you mentioned the Canadian Screen Award nominations in
I
your
did
news.
not.
Oh, well, we got that email coming in this morning. So congratulations. It's CBC Manitoba, 2 nominations. One is for one of our local newscasts for Best Local Newscast, and the other is a nominee for Best Local Reporter, Bartley Kivas.
Absolutely. Well deserved.
Yes, I just wanted to shout it out. Whoops, thank you, Heath.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm on location this morning, so sorry. I keep turning my mic on and off, and then I'm forgetting where I'm at. We are live at the Salvation Army Center of Hope, 180 Henry at Main, and right out the big, beautiful windows here, we can look out onto Main Street, and it looks like traffic is picking up, but still moving pretty good to the north. Our view is Thunderbird House out that direction. We're on the second floor in a health office, and it looks like over the Disraeli, things are moving pretty good as well. We're going to get to traffic in a moment. Right now, though, let's start with what is coming in our forecast. We have some snow arriving, and Abby is here with what's happening today.
Good morning once again. For Winnipeg, let's just brace ourselves as we are currently under a snowfall warning. The current temperature is a brisk minus 14 degrees under cloudy skies. Now, as the day progresses, we should be expecting a shift in the weather with the clouds gathering and then snowfall later this morning. We should anticipate approximately about 10 centimeters of snow when this is all done, but we're racing for the high of 0 today. Now, the eastward wind will add a chilly touch to what we're going to be feeling this morning, so it might feel like minus 23 as you start your day. If you're heading out, make sure you prepare accordingly. Good morning to folks in Brandon. You are under a snowfall warning. I know the day is still on, but more snow coming your way. Currently, temperatures at minus 15 degrees. Today forecast lots of cloudy skies for you, and then the snow beginning shortly for our folks in Brandon, accumulating to about 10 centimeters, and the high will be around minus 9. Good morning, Thompson. You are currently experiencing clear conditions with a temperature at minus 32 degrees. Thompson is going to be experiencing mainly sunny weather throughout the day, reaching a high of minus 10, but the wind chill is going to make it feel like minus 38 this morning, posing a risk of frostbite. Now in Churchill, which is seeing ice crystals, you're currently at minus 22. The day will bring a mix of sun and cloud. The high will be minus 15. And also, if we take a quick look at what's happening in Dauphin, right now Dauphin is under a light snow conditions at minus 19 degrees. Cloudy skies expected throughout the day, with the snow beginning later this morning. You'll see about 5 to 10 centimeters for folks in Dauphin, and the high will be around minus 9. For Gimli is currently at minus 19. You should be seeing about 2 to 4 centimeters of snow today. The high will be around minus 5. Steinbach is at minus 12, and And lastly, for folks in the Pembina Valley region, Morris is currently at minus 10. The day will become cloudy later, bringing about 10 centimeters of snow also, and the wind shifting east near noon. The high will be around minus 3. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at minus 14.
And that is your CBC regional forecast, getting all around the province with Abby Adeyemi. Brief traffic report from Corey Funk, who's here at the Center of Hope with me.
Yeah, you just got a call, not about half an hour ago from Vic. May still be a problem, so just heads up. If you're heading westbound Broadway, right outside the law courts, there was a collision. Was blocking the curb lane and middle lane. There's heard that there was a fire truck on scene, so keep left to get around that. May still be an issue, may be causing some backups. Would love to hear if that's actually been cleared or not. Give me a call on the CBC commuter line if you see what's going on. 204-788-3093.
Now, as I mentioned, Corey, we are here at 180 Henry at Main at the Salvation Army. This is the largest transitional and emergency shelter in Manitoba, and we are busting some myths because it's not just about emergency response. I think sometimes people pass by and think that's the main thing, but it certainly is a big part of what they do. Last week, you had a chance to go out, speaking of emergencies, in the Salvation Army's Extreme Environment Response vehicle, sort of out looking for people who just might need help overnight. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, and this when you're picturing this extreme environment response vehicle, picture an ambulance, because that's actually what it is. They convert an ambulance to make this thing happen. It's been in operation for several years now, and I spent the night riding in the passenger seat of the vehicle while Salvation Army employees James Paulson and Samuel Tim took turns driving and sitting in the back with people who need a ride. And as it happens, the night I met up with them was one of the coldest nights we've had in a while. It was last Tuesday night, if you remember how cold
yeah.
that got. So I walked into the garage on the main floor of this building here at 180 Henry just around 10 p.m. and they were loading up the vehicle with everything they need to spend the next 5 hours driving around the downtown area.
We got granola bars, we got hats, we got mitts, hand warmers, water, munchies, coats, jackets. We got shoes, shirts, things that can keep people warm and fed. And James Paulson. I'm the residential services supervisor for the Center of Hope.
I mean, of course, we can always come back if you are low on any supplies.
Do you find you run out often?
Yes, we do find and run out, and so we come back to restock. Well, I am Captain Samuel Tim. I'm the chaplain at Center of Hope.
And tonight's particularly cold. What do you kind of expect this night's going to be like?
We'll see a lot of people out there, just on the streets of Winnipeg. Yeah, we're gonna see quite a few people just stranded or cold or that need help, and we'll be there to help them. Do you want some snacks?
Yes, please. How you guys been?
Granola bars.
Oh, awesome.
Do you need gloves?
Yes, I definitely need gloves.
Hey,
I have
Sam, you got some gloves?
no gloves.
How? What difference do these guys make for you?
For me, Salvation Army provides emergency assistance when all essentials are needed or lost in certain atmospheric situations. Definitely, their friendliness and compassion attributes to the sense of belonging, whether it's to yourself that day or for a goal down the way.
Do you find like a job like this makes you more hopeful, less hopeful? Like, I'm curious. Like, you're doing this night in, night out, these long nights, helping people. Like, do you feel? I don't know. Do you feel like things can get better, or does this kind of wear on you over time?
I think helping people never really wears on me. I think that we are making a difference in people's lives. And not just that, but we're also, helping people when they need it. So I don't think that gets old at all.
Hello. Are you okay?
What?
Are you okay?
No.
Come here. What do you need?
My daughter's beating me up because I'm over the mountain. I'm sorry.
You need it right? You need it right?
No, I'll be okay.
You need it right.
I can't leave her in this area. It's too bad. I just gotta make it to my friends on Sherbrooke, and I'll be okay. Thank you. Drive safe, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
So I guess a situation like that, if they say they don't want to ride, I guess that's all you can really do, eh?
Yes, you can't really force it, It's got to be their choice, So we've offered them what we can, and they turn down the help. So I hope she's okay.
Sometimes you come across people who are being trafficked. What are the signs? Like, how do you know?
You can normally, if someone's standing on the side of the street, or there's a car with their lights on down the street and someone's waiting at the end of a corner or something, or you typically find people standing by themselves that look like they're waiting by a bus stop, but there's no bus stop. They'll often say that they're just waiting for their friend or whatever else, and sometimes we're able to get people to hop in and come back to shelter. Sometimes we're even able to do check-ins with people, and every hour we come back around and just make sure they're safe. And
Are you ever the point person to help them escape the trafficking situation, or is it mostly, do you feel like all you can really do is just kind of give them a night, a night away from it?
Good question. We have 70 private rooms for females, and they're not always full. So there's definitely options there. And then we also have Sarah's Place, which is it's I think it's 13 single suites for women or people coming out of being sexually trafficked. So there's definitely options for people who do want a fresh start or do want to get out of feeling trapped.
Hey, do you want hand warmers? And then do you want a hat? Do you want a hat?
Sure, yeah.
Stay warm.
Appreciate it, yeah. Thank you so much.
Oh, do you have somewhere warm to sleep tonight?
Yeah. I gotta crash on my friend's place today. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. God bless, guys.
Well, if I could just ask, what's your biggest challenge these days?
Weather. Weather is crazy, man. And also work. It's just hard to be outside and looking for a job and survive. Weather is the craziness, and there is no doors to stay, inside the bus stop. So the shelters are crowded, and sometimes it's just hard to be there.
So you don't have a home yourself?
I do once in a while, just work, in summers. But winter is kind of I stay with friends or whenever, whatever is possible.
What's your story, if I can ask?
Big time, I'm a father of 3 kids, and I lost my job in Edmonton, so I moved to Winnipeg during the COVID 2023. So it was just hard, I had a child support for over $1,200. I was making good money in Edmonton, but due to the separation, it really affected me, So when I moved to Winnipeg, I moved to do some work like $11 an hour. My child support was $1,200. You cannot survive that way. They canceled my license too, so I cannot even drive, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's a big challenge. The government system is just crap.
Would you mind sharing your name at all, or no?
I'm sorry?
Do you mind sharing your name at all?
Rico Dominguez.
Okay. Anything else you want to add at all, Rico?
No, man, it's just that the government the government has a lot of situations that we cannot control, and it's just difficult to survive.
And you want to find work, you want to find a place to live. It's just tough.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna be taking welding very soon, so I'm trying to get on the EI, and once I get the EI, I want to start welding because I need to get back to my life.
How safe do you feel? Shelters and things like that.
Well, you know what? It's not that crazy, but there is craziness, you know. It is craziness. It's once in a while you find all these kind of crazy people. But as long as I mind my own business. I don't like to meet a lot of people. I'm not that crazy.
Do you ever worry about having to sleep on the streets? Do you ever worry about having to sleep on the streets on a night like this?
Not really. But you never know. You never know. Anything can happen at any time. It's like anytime, there's fights or people yelling each other or stuff like that. Like anything can happen.
Do you have place to stay tonight?
Yeah, I do actually.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if you have extra socks.
Like what?
Socks.
Socks? Yeah, James, socks, please. Take it easy, huh?
Okay, thank you guys.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
So all in, James and Samuel helped about 45 or so people, which they said it was actually a slower night. They usually help about 50 to 70 people on average. James said he has to administer naloxone a couple times a week. Luckily, that didn't happen the night I was along with them. But it still felt really busy. They at around 1 a.m., they helped a 13-year-old girl get from the north end to her home safely in the Maples. They also handed out countless socks, toques, mitts, granola bars. But there was also a lot of people who just waved us off. And as you heard in the tape, it's tough for the crew when that happens. But staff say they can't force people to be helped if they don't want to be helped.
All right. Thank you, Corey.
Thanks, Marcy.
Corey, spending a night last week out with the Salvation Army's Extreme Environment Response Vehicle. We are live at the Salvation Army this morning and still ahead after World Report. Where would you be then without this place?
Probably frozen somewhere. Yeah, probably dead or frozen.
That haunting and harsh reality faces many people who find themselves without shelter, of course. Michelle McNally lives in the women's shelter here at the Salvation Army on the women's floor. She'll turn 51 years old next month. She says one bad decision or moment of bad luck can change a person's life. We'll hear what changed her life. That's coming up after 8 o'clock. I'm Marcy Marcusa. It is 7:51 a.m. on 89.3 right now. You're on CBC. You might be watching on YouTube. Good morning if you are. We're on the second floor here at the Salvation Army in one of the health offices. Or you might be listening on the CBC Listen app. Well, we have developing news this morning just out at 7 o'clock. The Downtown Winnipeg Biz released their annual Downtown Snapshot report. It says even though 2023 saw more people visiting and moving into the area, more downtown businesses closed than opened last year. Now, it says while there's still work to do, Winnipeg's downtown is on the right track. Kate Venski's here to talk about it, CEO of the Downtown Winnipeg Biz. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning, Marcy, and happy belated birthday to you.
Oh, that's kind. Thank you very much. I had a big one yesterday, yeah. Let's start with the good news in this. So more people moving and visiting Winnipeg's downtown.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we just released a report. So this really is a snapshot, really looking through an economic development lens downtown. We know there are lots of stories downtown, and you've got, you're right in Salvation Army in our zone this morning. And there's so much happening downtown. There are so many challenges, but there are also some really great things happening. And I think what the report this morning shows is that downtown is on the right track. Our downtown population, the residential population, has grown significantly since 2016. It's still growing now. The latest numbers show that over 18,000 people are living downtown, according to the 2021 census. And we expect that number to increase by more than 2,000 just in the next 2 years. So there's a lot of residential buildings going up, but we are seeing more people come back downtown, which is really exciting. People visiting here for either business or pleasure increased almost 10% in 2023 compared to 2022. We're seeing hotels bounce back faster than anticipated, and a lot of investment downtown from all levels of government. I think we're really, in 2023, we're starting to hear a lot more about commitments and how we can all work together to move this neighborhood forward.
Now, the other side of this that may be of concern is 10 more businesses closed downtown in 2023 than opened. So 27 closed, 17 open. But I understand that gap is less than the year before. Is that right?
Absolutely. So, when we look at over the last few years what's happened downtown, in 2019, we had double the number of businesses opening than closing. You're always going to see some shift in the neighborhood. That's expected. But when 2020 hit, that trend completely reversed, where we saw double the number of closures than openings. The good news is that gap is starting to close. And actually, when we look at 2023, we're getting very close to hitting net zero. That's one of our goals for the Downtown Winnipeg Biz. And in Q4, we finally had the same number of businesses open that closed. So we're going in the right direction, but it still shows that there's still so many challenges. The pandemic, we know, hit businesses really hard, hit the neighborhood hard downtown, hit the community hard. So we are bouncing back, but it is taking time.
Is there any commonality that you can share? The report doesn't go into these details, but about the businesses that left or closed. Is it just pandemic financials, or are people having trouble getting employees to come and work in downtown offices? Like, what's the common reason people would have left or businesses would have left?
Yeah, what we've heard, we do ask the businesses, what are their reasons? And we definitely heard it's just been hard to make ends meet. It's also been really hard to predict customer traffic. A lot of employers have moved to a hybrid model, and so sometimes you can predict it. Fridays typically tend to be a little bit slower downtown. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays can be a little bit busier. But they have been having trouble just getting that traffic flow back. And I think, you always see some closures, whether it's retirements or people wanting to go on and do something new. But I think our biggest concern is our ground floor vacancy. It is those small shops that make a neighborhood, that have street level activity. Our ground floor vacancy in the Downtown Winnipeg Business Improvement Zone is still over 30%. So that's where we want to put a big focus, is how can we, attract more businesses, bring that street life. And what we know is we need is more people here. So definitely people are coming back. But our big push right now is we need more people living downtown. And I think that's, as a city, going to help us financially forward. And when we look at density, and we know there's some really exciting things coming with the Housing Accelerator Funds with the City of Winnipeg.
There's a lot of data in this. I'm looking at, the nature of businesses. 19% are accommodation and food services. Still, that's the greatest number. 9%, the smaller number, finance and insurance. And you also compare us to downtowns across Canada. So where are we doing better, and where are we in line with the challenges that are being faced with downtowns across the rest of the country?
Well, we know when it comes to concerns around safety, that is a concern that cities across North America are facing right now. And it's not just a downtown issue. It is across cities. And we're seeing that here in Winnipeg. Where we're actually doing better than some other cities is in our office vacancy, which is a bit of a surprise. We do track that and follow along the different real estate agencies that focus on that. We look at, we are still seeing an increase in our office vacancy downtown, which was anticipated even outside of the pandemic because there was new office space built. So there's still a little bit of that shuffle happening. But our office space downtown is still below the national average, which I think is a good signal for Winnipeg. And we are still seeing more leases signed. So people are coming back, whether it's a hybrid model, whether it's full-time, we're starting to see that shift. And when we look at, the makeup of businesses downtown, I think it's really exciting to see, restaurants and hotels and coffee shops. So those are some of the announcements that happened in 2023. And we are seeing that's what people are coming downtown for. It used to just be about work. Right now, we're really seeing that focus on entertainment. We know we've got all of our professional sports teams here, the Jets, the Moose, the Goldeyes, and, of course, the Winnipeg Sea Bears, which started up in 2023 downtown. So they're coming for entertainment. That's where they're spending their money downtown. And we know it's always been a focus around arts and culture. It's where arts, culture, business all come together downtown. And we know our arts organizations still need more support.
Lots more questions. I know we're just into the top line data. Just came out an hour ago. Kate, really appreciate your time this morning on CBC.
Thank you so much, Marcy. Take care.
You as well. Kate Bensky, the CEO of the Downtown Winnipeg Biz. It'll be interesting to see how this report lines up with some of the concerns we heard from the Jets ownership group about attendance downtown at their game specifically, but also the mayor now talking about reopening Portage and Main to pedestrian traffic. And where we're sitting this morning at the Salvation Army, of course, the whole need is for people to have homes, more affordable housing downtown. So this report just came out. Please read more about it on our website throughout the day, and more analysis to come. Right now, quick headlines with Heather Wells.
Well, the decision to eliminate standardized tests for students in grades 10 and 12 is not sitting well with some people. Anna Stockey at the University of Winnipeg says standardized tests could have been reviewed without canceling them outright. And back to work on Broadway for provincial politicians. The legislative session begins today. Premier Wab Kinew says the spring session will see the province work on healthcare, safer communities, and the economy. I'll be back with more Manitoba News at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Minus 14 in Winnipeg, a high of 0. It's going to be windy, and we are expecting snow. Our live broadcast from the Salvation Army continues. The executive director will join us to talk about his perspective on the way forward. Also, whether or not this organization might become part of a longer-term solution for more permanent housing for people. Plus, we're going to hear Michelle's story, at one point living in a 7-Eleven parking lot for a year.
5 perceptive panelists, 5 blockbuster books, 4 days of smart and sassy deliberation and debate, but there can only be one winner, the best book to carry us forward. Hi, I'm Ali Hassan, and I'm hosting Canada's favorite book battle, Canada Reads 2024. One book to carry us forward. This week on CBC Radio 1, CBC Listen, and CBC Gem. For more, go to cbcbooks.ca.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
For more than a decade, Masha Aliokina from the punk band Pussy Riot has been very loud in her criticism of Russian President Vladimir Putin. And despite time in a Russian penal colony, she's not holding back. Coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Nikki Haley is expected to exit the Republican presidential race. Multiple American news outlets are reporting she will share that later this morning. The former UN ambassador will speak at 10 Eastern from Charleston, South Carolina. Haley lost all but one state to Donald Trump in yesterday's Super Tuesday voting. Richard Madden has been following the story from Washington. And Richard, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, exit stage right. The Wall Street Journal was first to report she'll drop out of the race with a statement later this morning. And that was the big question after last night's result. What would her next move be? Now, she did have a glimmer of hope with her win in Vermont, denying Trump a primary sweep of the 15 states. And the results show roughly 30% of the party voted against Trump. But still, her path to the nomination is now mathematically impossible, so all eyes are on what her next move will be. There are reports that she will not endorse Trump or urge supporters to unite behind him. So what will her message be? Stay tuned for that. Now, from Trump's perspective, meantime, his grip of the party has been cemented after last night's results, where he painted a bleak picture in his victory speech at Mar-a-Lago. Take a listen.
Our cities are choking to death, our states are dying, and frankly, our country is dying, and we're going to make America great again, greater than ever before.
So it's all but certain of a Trump-Biden rematch in November. Biden, of course, dominated the Democratic primaries, except for an upset loss to a relatively unknown candidate in American Samoa.
What happens next?
Yeah, so President Biden will outline his vision in his State of the Union address tomorrow. Then circle your calendar for next Wednesday. That's when both Biden and Trump will likely clinch their party's nominations after primary contests in Georgia, Washington State, and Mississippi. In fact, both leaders will be campaigning in Georgia this weekend. The kickoff to the general election is pretty much underway now.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. CBC News has learned the Canadian government plans to restore its funding to UNRWA. The UN aid agency has had to answer for allegations that surfaced earlier this year. In January, Israel accused a number of members of being involved in the October 7th Hamas attacks. Since then, some countries have paused their support. The CBC's Janice McGregor joins me now from Ottawa. Janice, walk us through the Canadian government's change of heart.
Canada had followed the American lead when it hit pause on its financial support for UNRWA in late January. That followed allegations from Israel that around a dozen of the agency's employees allegedly participated in the October 7th attacks, part of a pattern, Israel claimed, of infiltration by members of armed groups like Hamas, and what Israel claims has been the use of UNRWA facilities and resources to aid and abet violence. A government source tells CBC News that Canadian officials have received an interim report from the United Nations about its investigation into these allegations, and based on that, Canada is comfortable now resuming funding. There are questions, however, about whether this pause was really that much of a pause. Canada's next payment wasn't due until April, and with the minister now expected to announce the restoration of support, it's unclear what payments actually were withheld while the authorities investigated. On top of April's regularly scheduled payment of $25 million, a government source says that the minister is also going to announce additional funding. But the reality on the ground, as the minister saw for himself in a recent visit, is that it's very difficult for other humanitarian organizations to get into Gaza right now. As Martin Griffiths, the UN's Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, told the CBC's The National last night.
We need, trucks to be allowed to pass. We need protection by the police. We need proper agreements which are sustained with all sides to allow for safe delivery. And we need, of course, UNRWA to be there as the prime mover of the humanitarian operation in Gaza.
So, Janice, what can you tell us about the pressure for the Trudeau government to restore this funding?
Palestinian activist groups, Quebec's labor movement, New Democrats, others all demanded that this funding be restored. But this decision today isn't likely to be well received by the opposition. Deputy Conservative leader Melissa Lantsman said on social media last night that UNRWA facilities are used for Hamas terror infrastructure, that it does employ what she said hundreds with direct ties to terrorism. Disgraceful, doesn't even begin to describe this government, she said.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. The Bank of Canada will unveil its latest interest rate policy later this morning. There is a nearly unanimous prediction that rates will remain unchanged at 5%, but experts are looking for a hint of when the bank may start cutting those borrowing costs. Peter Armstrong reports.
In Canada's economy, notoriously awash in debt, one question looms over everything. When will the Bank of Canada start cutting interest rates? The central bank has spent the last 2 years driving up borrowing costs as it tried to get inflation back under control. The last time we heard from the Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem, back in early February, he wasn't ready to make any promises.
It's premature to start discussing lowering interest rates, but as inflation comes down, yes, we will have that discussion.
Since then, the year-over-year rate of inflation has decelerated to 2.9%. That's within the bank's broad target range, but not quite all the way down to its specific 2% target. Most economists believe the bank will leave rates unchanged until this summer. Jim Thorne, chief market strategist with Wellington Altus Wealth Management, says that would be a mistake.
The data says cut. The data says get it down to 3%. And let's see how things happen.
Thorne says leaving rates high for too long will cause real damage for Canadian households, businesses, and even the banks that have loaned out all that money. So even if the bank leaves rates unchanged today, watch for any hints the bank may offer on a timeline to get back to a more neutral rate. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Investigators from both the U.S. and Canada are partnering to figure out what caused a flight to crash in Tennessee. 5 Canadians were on board, including 3 children. The single-engine plane crashed alongside a busy highway west of Nashville on Monday. It took off from a small airport in the Toronto area and made stops in Pennsylvania and Kentucky. Global Affairs Canada says it is aware of the deaths but will not share any details due to privacy reasons. British Columbia is suing several people it says did not qualify for an affordable housing program in the province's capital. As Lindsay Duncombe reports, the lawsuits are raising questions about the government's ability to live up to its housing promises.
It's a total mess.
That's how BC opposition MLA Peter Millibar describes what happened at Vivid Condominiums in downtown Victoria. The province provided a $53 million low-interest loan to the developer. The goal was to pass those savings on to middle-income buyers. To qualify, they had to make no more than $150,000 a year, own no other properties, and promise to live there 2 years without renting it out. But according to lawsuits filed by BC Housing, at least 13 buyers never moved in. Among them, a retiree who owns a $1.7 million home, a couple owning 5 properties worth more than $3.2 million, another owning 2 condominiums, and a company that owns or operates 9 other properties. The allegations have not been proven in court. Andy Yan is the director of the City program at Simon Fraser University.
It is in
infuriating to hear about this type of abuse for really a program that is intended to really create homes as opposed to having people use these homes as investments.
BC Housing says the buyers were vetted by the developer and a third party, then audited by government. Ravi Kahlon is the housing minister.
Anyone that tries to use schemes to try to find ways to take affordable housing that's meant for people who are struggling will get caught, and in this case they were.
BC Housing is seeking punitive damages as a deterrent. The developer, Chard Developments, would not comment while the cases are before the courts. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Barbie is turning 65 years old this week, and a Canadian star is being honored with her own doll.
Man, I feel like a woman.
Shania Twain and 8 other inspirational women will get a Barbie made in their likeness. The Shania Barbie features Twain's iconic outfit from the video Man, I Feel Like a Woman. The dolls are being released ahead of the toy's 65th birthday on March 9th and will also mark International Women's Day this Friday. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live in the heart of Winnipeg. We are at the Salvation Army this morning, 180 Henry and Main Street, finding out what happens in a person's life that lands them here.
I was born in Winnipeg, grew up in the West End, lived in Wolseley forever.
How long have you lived here?
August 26th at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Why do you know that so well?
Because it's life-changing.
I'm from Uganda, me and my two boys, me and my wife.
How old are the kids?
2, and the other one is 3.5.
I stayed here a few times. I was in and out of prison.
This is the largest transitional and emergency shelter in our province. This half hour, the executive director will join us with his perspective on meeting the needs of vulnerable populations in our city. We also have one more story to share. She thought she found a great place to rent, but she was scammed out of thousands. It led her to Winnipeg and the Salvation Army. We'll hear Michelle's story in a moment. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells with headlines this morning. Hi there.
Hi there. Well, more than a dozen people are homeless after fire destroyed a West End apartment block last night. That building at 774 Toronto Street was 113 years old. We're going to hear from one woman who lived there who is now homeless. And you'll be hearing this again.
Heather?
Yeah, sorry. I disappeared in the snow.
I'm like, what's happened to Heather?
But in Brandon, what you heard there was shoveling. People are shoveling because if they don't do it, if they don't keep their sidewalks clear, they can be fined up to $150. We'll hear more in our next news at 8:30.
No worries. Let's find out about that snow. It is coming here to Winnipeg as well. Abby's here with a brief look at our forecast.
I guess Heather's already anticipating how she's going to dig out tomorrow.
I'm like, she doesn't like the fact that it's going to snow. She's leaving. She doesn't like shoveling. That's it. She left.
Right now it's crispy -12 in the city under cloudy skies. Today forecast brings a shift in the weather with the temperature reaching a high of 0. We have a snowfall warning for southern Manitoba, which includes Winnipeg, Brandon, southeast Manitoba, the Red River and Pembina Valleys, the Interlake and the White Shell. We should be seeing about 10 to 15 centimeters. And right now we are at -12.
Corey?
Yeah, I was talking earlier about collision westbound Broadway just at the law courts. That has now been cleared. Thanks to Steve for calling the commuter line to tell me about that. There was that fire yesterday, Toronto and Notre Dame, in that building there. That still has Toronto from Notre Dame to Wellington closed as fire crews kind of still deal with the aftermath of that. Also, 63 Hydro customers in that area are also out of power right now. They're going to be taking ice off some lines and hope to have power restored, Hydro says, by noon. For folks in that area who might not have power yet. But if you see anything else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. If you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call. I'll let folks know what you're seeing. 204-788-3093.
Well, it's a bit early this morning to start waking everyone up on the floors where everyone lives here at the Salvation Army, but I was here last week and I got a chance to look around some of the rooms, specifically one room with intake worker Stephen Hunter.
Is this the area where it's all women in this wing?
Yes, this is the 6th floor, and it is only women on this floor. The 6th floor and 7th floor here at 180 Henry are specifically for women only. We have private rooms, plus we have overflow spaces, which are like dorm areas where we have like 4 women to a room.
So a nice bright window, and then a bed, personal space, obviously, and a lockable door, which you hear a lot of people saying it's peace of mind, right?
Yes, of course. It's nice, people who are staying here don't have like a lot of things, but the things that they do have, they'd like to keep safe. So, it's nice that they have a space of their own that they can do so.
Well, that space we were looking at is Michelle McNally's room. Michelle will be 51 years old next month. I sat down with her to find out how she not only got here to the Salvation Army, where we're broadcasting from this morning, but to Winnipeg.
How long have you lived here?
August 26th at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Why do you know that so well?
Because it's life-changing.
Take a second, please. So what brought you here that afternoon?
I came from Calgary. A little backstory, because this isn't the first time Salvation has saved my life. This will be my second time. When I was 16, I was lured into the sex trafficking situation. And when the police found me, I was pregnant. And my parents didn't want me. I come from abuse, hence a lot are lured into that. Anyways, my parents didn't want me, so the Calgary City Police sent me to the Salvation Army Bethany home in Saskatoon. And normally you go there to abort or give up your child. And I kept my daughter. When I moved out with my daughter, they told me back then, if anything you need, because they're my support, I came from no support, if you need anything, we are here for you for the rest of your life, kind of thing. So when the world shattered for me and homelessness became my approach, I came back home to Salvation Army. So 34 years later, I'm back in care.
In Winnipeg this time?
This time.
Yeah. So you said August?
August 26th.
August 26th. So that afternoon, what led you here? Where had you been living before?
Living in Calgary, my ex and I went to rent a place, and it was a scam. So we were out $2,200 with a U-Haul full of stuff and figuring out, now what do we do? So we threw everything in storage and figured, well, we'll live in a hotel. Well, in Calgary, the hotel rates are $3,000 a month. So we couldn't do it. So we lived at our local 7-Eleven for a year.
What do you mean you lived there?
They gave us literally a parking stall and let us live at their 7-Eleven.
What were you living in?
Our ride, our SUV. So then when my ex job took that he has to go on the road, I couldn't stay in the car. So he went to his job in camp and I picked Winnipeg to move to. But homelessness is very stressful, so is the world right now. That just that one incident, being scammed out of a home, put so much pressure on us. We are now separated, living in different provinces.
Were you homeless here as well at first?
I got off the plane at 3:30 in the afternoon, and while at 2:30, drove through the Forks, because I've never been to Winnipeg before. I've never been to Manitoba, kind of thing. Checked in at 3:30 in the afternoon.
What's your living condition here like? Where do you actually live? Do you have a room or?
I have my own room, so gratefulness, like on one of the ladies' floors, not the MAP program. On each floor of the ladies 6 and 7, we call it the MAP program, where like our rooms are full. So then the Salvation Army makes extra space for extra ladies so that they're not sleeping out on the streets. Like, we don't have all the beds, but here's, an extra bed or a mat or...
Where would you be then without this place?
Probably frozen somewhere. Yeah, probably dead or frozen.
What resources are you grateful for that are here for you?
Oh, a good morning breakfast and a meal, because we get 3 meals a day. Being able to sit with a counselor or a social worker, or if they don't know, they know who to call to find someone to help you out. So the outreach of staff here is amazing. Because if they don't know, they'll find you a place. For me, trauma. There's no trauma specialist per se within the building, but one was found for me within the community. They have tons of resources, but sometimes the wait now is getting a little longer because there's more of us needing the resources.
How do you spend your days?
For me, this first bit has been chasing my health. So with homelessness, sometimes our health gets kind of pushed aside, and then the stress of all the stress. So just chasing doctor's appointments and then just getting my resume ready to find work.
What do you want to do?
Drive a forklift and pack boxes. No people, but jobs are tight, right? And when you look at the money aspect of everything right now, it's almost like I need to be looking for 3 jobs just so that I can make the rent, my bills. And people always assume when you're homeless, this is your life, but we do have a life out there. Like I have children, I have child support payments that need to be, there's more than just what you see of the homeless person in the shelter. There's a whole story behind them of what brought you here.
What helps you on days where you may feel overwhelmed?
The staff. Just general connection, I think, of the people around here. Other residents, like we're all in this kind of together right now.
And just as a last question, you heard me talking to the last gentleman, Sean, about stigma. I wonder whether or not you feel the same, that there's a stigma.
Oh. Well, everybody assumes, it seems, that if you're homeless, it's because of drugs or alcohol and yes, there is a percentage of that, but sometimes there's just a bad day that happened. Like we're only one moment, everyone, away from one bad choice, sending money over the internet and being scammed, right? Like one bad choice can get you there.
Michelle McNally lives here where we're broadcasting from this morning. On the women's floor is where she lives. We're at the Salvation Army at 180 Henry and Main Street. Well, where we are this morning is part of a 3-block stretch in our city between Higgins and Alexander that is home to many shelters and services. And so often you see people spilling out onto the streets. And that is because there's so much need in Winnipeg right now. And with us to talk about the way forward is the Salvation Army's Executive Director, Mark Stewart, has been listening throughout the morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
You know what? We got here at 5 this morning. There were people outside the door. Is it always like that?
Yeah, 24 hours a day we're open. Our front doors are open, so we have staff at the front desk, which means that at any time throughout the night, if you're coming from this community, other communities, that we're open, our doors open, and we want to welcome you in. Unfortunately, we're getting quite full right now. We're seeing just over 420 people a day, so it's getting a little bit less comfortable in our building the more beds that we add, but we don't want to turn anybody away.
What's the longest someone actually stays here? Because it's not just about emergency response, right? There's a range.
So the ranges for emergency shelter is usually around 3 months, and then for a transitional shelter, it's up to 2 years.
What's it like for you to look out the window? We're on the second floor here in a health office, but I mean, there's people out right now at the door. There's a teepee that was set up just sort of next door by Thunderbird House. So presumably could be for shelter. I'm not sure. There's a makeshift sort of place where people have set up kind of an encampment for themselves as we were driving up Austin here. What's it like for you to see, as I mentioned, the need sort of spilling out into Winnipeg because it's just so difficult to keep up?
A lot of it is point of view. I see, I see these things, but I also see the positive things that have happened over the last, 18 years that I've been involved with the Salvation Army. Nadinawaymak, a shelter that's just down the street, which is helping people. Mumaway, which has a village here that's been created over the last year. Last couple of years, which is housing people. The Thunderbird House, which is doesn't look its best right now, but is the heart of this community. So I know that working with the other organizations within the community, everybody has a heart for this work. Everyone wants to see chronic homelessness end, right? And that's why we're looking at more long-term housing, but the stigma of the people that are in front of our building right now, they're the people that live here. They're good people. And just listening to the stories this morning, it's astounding the resilience that people actually show that are homeless.
Do you see a future where the Salvation Army could get involved in longer-term housing, like longer stay housing? Because you were telling me off air that the Salvation Army is involved in that in some other provinces. So beyond the 2 years that you have right now?
Well, we would love to be a part of long-term housing. So we know that housing is a big part of the answer. Deep, affordable housing, which is 30% of the income would be going towards rent. We know that that's needed in the community. We want to be a part of that. We have a small piece of that, which is a 13 unit, floor where we have women that are living long-term. So we're kind of testing the waters with it to see what it would look like. I think that the model that we're looking at is a little bit different. We don't want to supervise people. We want to support people. And we find that a lot of people that live within our building, and some of the stories that you've heard, they need support, but they don't need 24-hour support. So, how can we look at doing something long-term where people can just actually live and be successful?
You were in the news last week because of the refugee story, right? Talking about the number of, being part of the response to helping asylum seekers, refugees, people coming here. And I think you opened 60 beds even last year to sort of try to meet that need. What do you hear about why Winnipeg, or why that's happening, sort of why people are landing here?
I think that there might be a myth, and I'm not sure if it's true, that if you come to Winnipeg, you're going to get services faster, you're going to get your claims faster. I don't know if that's true, but for our part of it, we're seeing about 120 refugees a day.
A day?
A day. So that would be static numbers. So
Yep.
some people are coming, some people are leaving, but the number is sticking around 120. Again, if you're from this community, if you're from another community and you show up at the door, whether it's by yourself or with your children, which we heard earlier, our door is going to be open so that we can try to support you and help you get back in the community in a safe space.
Now, you coordinate right now with some of the other agencies to try to help. You're involved, I understand, even trying to, with even some of its translation services and some of it's just figuring out what that support looks like. How sustainable is it all, though, when you think about all these needs we've been exploring this morning through the stories of people?
Well, it's not sustainable. I think that, we do need, I think the shelter systems, definitely don't want to speak on behalf of all of us, but, we're stressed. I think that, when we're adding more beds, we're talking about adding mats on the floor with blankets to try to keep people comfortable and keep people in from the cold, but to actually provide dignity to the people that we're serving, I think that we need to look at different solutions. And that solutions, at the end of the day, always looks at long-term housing. We need to build more long-term housing. We need to be a part of the solution on ending chronic homelessness within our community. And, it's a battle every day.
We didn't even touch this morning yet on the fact that you have some mental health residential care here as well. How many beds here?
So we have an 18-bed mental health facility, which is called Haven, and we've been operating that a very long time. So what I would say is that's the gold standard of care that we provide. So they have mental health workers, they have daily facilitations, they have up to 2-year stays, so they have all of the services connected to them. For the most part, the guys are level 5 mental health, but there's other scenarios as well. And a lot of those guys that live in that program have come from emergency shelters. So you come into emergency shelter, you meet with our caseworkers, and what we want to do is find out what the best solution for you is, right?
You and I were at a breakfast last year. We ran into each other, and you said two things to me that stayed with me, and they were both busting myths. One was, hey, Marcy, did you know the average age of the person that stays here at the Salvation Army Center of Hope is, I think you said, a male, 55 years old. Mm-hmm. And then you said what we've heard repeatedly this morning is that the stigma that everyone is struggling, and some are, but that everyone is struggling with some type of a drug addiction. Mm-hmm. And that's that is the biggest issue, is just got to go, that this is about people's, finances, not being able to make ends meet, not being able to find housing, right?
Yeah, and we recognize that there's a drug epidemic in Winnipeg, and it's happening, and you can't deny it. Primarily within our shelter, we do have people that use drugs, and if that's the way that they want to live their life, that's a harm reduction principle-based model is what we use. So we want to support you in whatever lifestyle you're living, but primarily within our building, we do see an older population. who are looking for safety, and the safety that we can provide with our private rooms makes us kind of a choice for them.
Where is that in Winnipeg, if not here, for someone who's an older somebody that is a little bit older that's looking for a safe place to live, but they need somewhere affordable?
Well, definitely when we look at the shelter system, we look at Nadinaway Mac Main Street Project, Salome Mission, and there's more. I truly believe that they all want to create safety for their participants as well. So working together, what we try to do is create best practice so that anybody that's coming in shelter is going to receive that dignity, receive that care. But primarily for us, we're the ones that have the private rooms.
Just last, you're the first executive director of this organization, the Salvation Army, who has lived experience with homelessness. You at one point in your life lived in your car. You shared with me. I wonder, with respect to, and this is said with respect, the hardworking leaders and the politicians who are trying to help the city's most vulnerable, but given all of your perspective, what do you understand that they might not when they're sitting down to make the plans to help these populations?
Well, being a lived experience leader, I have to thank the Salvation Army for that, for giving me an opportunity to, to grow with this organization. The thing that you need to understand, which is very difficult to understand, is that true feeling of hopelessness and loss when you have no choice, right? When you've run out of options, when you don't have a dollar, you have nobody to call, where the only thing you have is to sleep in your car, or sleep outside, or try to get into a shelter. The more marginalized and vulnerable you become, the less choices and options you have in life. So when we are talking about building and growing, we need to include lived experience people, because they should have a choice on what we're trying to create for them.
Thank you very much for having us here today, and for allowing CBC to set up our show here today. Appreciate you.
Thank you. You're the best.
Mark Stewart, Executive Director of Winnipeg Salvation Army, here live at the Center of Hope. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:31, it is -12 in Winnipeg. We've got a snowfall warning for the city of Winnipeg, Brandon, southwest Manitoba, the Pembina and Red River Valleys, the Interlake and Whiteshell, anywhere between 10 and 15 centimeters of snow. In Winnipeg, that'll be coupled with a strong wind today and a high of 0. People who lived in a West End apartment block are homeless this morning after fire yesterday. Catherine Robichaud lived in the building at 774 Toronto Street. She was working from home when she heard the fire alarm go off in that 113-year-old building. Robichaud opened her door and looked into the hall.
I saw smoke pouring out of the top part of the door next to my apartment, and I heard the fire alarm, so I went back and I was like, I gotta go. My apartment's on fire. They're like, Kay, grab your cats and get out of there. First thing I did was I grabbed my cats and my keys and my phone, and I was out of there so fast. I don't even have my jacket anymore. I have nothing. I lost everything in my home.
Robichaud says that flames had already spread to her bathroom as she was running out the door. She says one of her neighbors couldn't save their cat. The city says the entire building is expected to be a loss. A Winnipeg City activist wants Manitoba Public Health to set up pop-up vaccine clinics for measles. The province doesn't have any confirmed cases so far, but the measles has been detected this year in other parts of Canada, and cases have exploded in Europe. Health officials say you should check your immunization records with a doctor or public health office. Point Douglas Residents Committee Chairperson Catherine Flynn says removing barriers to immunization is important.
Asking them, which is the official response, please go to your family doctor and check this out, that's not a reasonable response. And I think what we should be doing is getting some pop-up clinics in places like Barber House here, which has a daycare, and allowing parents and children to get vaccinated immediately.
Experts are worried about people getting exposed to measles during the upcoming spring break travel period. The decision to eliminate standardized tests for some Manitoba students is getting a failing grade from some critics. Provincial tests in math and English for grade 10 and 12 students are being put on hold to allow the province time to review how students are assessed. Anna Stocky is a professor of mathematics at the University of Winnipeg. She says the standardized tests could have been reviewed without canceling them altogether.
They're a uniform measure to make sure that everyone is learning the material that we need them to learn, so that we know that they're prepared for post-secondary or for other things in life. Those projects and assignments and school tests, those are important too. But standardized tests do need to be a part of a successful education system.
Supporters of the move say not all standardized exams are paused, and many other forms of evaluation will continue to exist for students across the province. Heritage Winnipeg hopes a city lawsuit against the owner of an apartment building on South Osborne hasn't come too late. Cindy Tugwell says it's been a frustrating decade dealing with the vacant Rubin block. That's on Osborne and Morley. Her group tried to convince the owner to sell. It even found a buyer. Now the city's suing the owner for almost $40,000 for unpaid inspections dating back almost 6 years.
This will open the pathway for the city to be able to take title without compensation. And I think that we have an opportunity here to still save the building and still have it part of an integral part of the community, as opposed to, demolition.
Tugwell says it is a beautiful building which would be well suited for affordable housing. Back to work for provincial politicians on Broadway as the legislative session begins today. Premier Rob Canoe says the spring session will see the province work on healthcare, safer communities, and the economy. The new government's first budget will be delivered in early April. Shovel or be fined? That's reality now for people in Brandon. Sunday's big dump of snow there is the first under that city's new bylaw. People in Brandon could be fined up to $150 if they fail to clear their sidewalks. Doug McCallum came home to knee-deep snow on his driveway yesterday after a trip to Florida. He says this bylaw is a good idea.
There'll be people that can't do it, physically can't do it, and for them I feel badly, but we are capable for sure of doing it. So I think that, you can do your part or whatever. I mean, it's not too much longer till spring.
The City of Brandon says since this is the first year, officers will focus on education instead of fining people who do not shovel. And they'll be shoveling all over southern Manitoba with a snowfall warning coming this way. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you for the morning, Heather.
You're welcome.
Big thanks to Megan Ketchison, as well as to Heather Wells and Joni Nicolo in our newsroom this morning. Brad Lilly's behind the YouTube controls. Abby Adeyemi, who has, in a moment, a last look at the weather. But first, Corey, anything to say about traffic?
Yeah, westbound Inkster at Shepherd. There's a stalled car blocking the curb lane. Keep left to get around that. And Toronto between Notre Dame and Wellington is closed because of that fire from yesterday.
Abby, briefly, what's up?
-12 in Winnipeg. We're expecting a high of 0 today. Southern Manitoba is expecting a snowfall because of the snowfall warning. We should see 10 to 15 centimeters once this system rolls by.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
And today on The Current, they're going to hear a story of a man who's written a book about the human cost of homelessness and solutions to Canada's housing crisis. Which, of course, will grow right out of our show here in Winnipeg. Thank you so much to the Salvation Army Center of Hope for having us here, to all of the people who live here, who shared their stories with us on CBC. And if you missed the show, please go back and listen on the CBC Listen app or check it out on YouTube. So we've been live at 180 Henry at Main. If you have an idea for a community studio where you think we should be live with the morning show, let us know. And we just might be out and seeing you sometime soon. Take care. Big thanks to the Salvation Army, and thanks to everyone for listening this morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC.